As determined by Glamorgan Spring Bay Council in April 2017, all ordinary and special meetings of council are to be video, audio recorded and streamed live. In response to COVID-19 social gathering regulations, this meeting will be held remotely via video conference. Where possible, a live stream of the meeting will be made available. A recording of the meeting will be available via the link on the Glamorgan Spring Bay Council website following the meeting. In accordance with the Local Government Act 1993 and Regulation 33, these video audio files will be retained by Council for at least 6 months and made available for viewing live, as well as online within 5 days of the scheduled meeting. The written minutes of a meeting, once confirmed, prevail over the video audio recording of the meeting. Welcome councillors and staff, and I declare the meeting open at 2:07 p.m. The Glamorgan Spring Bay Council acknowledges the traditional owners of our region and recognises their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. All councillors are present. In attendance, we have the Acting General Manager, Mrs Marissa Walters, Council's Executive Officer, Mrs Josie Higgins, Planner, Ms Robin Bevilacqua, Council's Executive Manager of Development, Mr Dion Belligan, and Mr Rob Brunning, the Works Manager. I request elected members to indicate whether they have, 1, any interest, personally or via a close associate, as defined in section 49 of the Local Government Act 1993, or 2, any conflict as described in Council's Code of Conduct for councillors in any item included in the agenda. Nothing, thank you. Sorry, I missed one there, just confirming there are no late reports today.
No.
Thank you. Confirmation of minutes 2.1, Ordinary Meeting of Council, May 26, 2020. Are there any concerns in respect to the accuracy of the minutes? None, thank you. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Brenny? Councillor Brenny, just off mute, please.
I move that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of council held Tuesday, 26th of May 2020 at 2 p.m. be confirmed as a true and correct record.
Thank you. Somebody to second, please. Deputy Mayor Woods. Put the motion. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. Item 2.2. There was workshops on Tuesday, the 9th of June 2020. Again on the 16th of June 2020. There's a recommendation on page 8. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Browning.
The council notes the information.
Thank you. Somebody to second? Deputy Mayor, thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to public question time. Bear with me because we have quite a few. 3.1 is questions without notice. 3.1 is questions without notice.
I'm jumping ahead. My fault.
Questions without notice, which will be Buckland and then the next one.
So we don't did it Friday.
Yeah. Because these other ones were actually on.
Okay. Yep.
Well, no, we can go that way. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm going to go. So what's happened here is there were questions that came through that should have been questions on notice. So I'll go through those now, and I'll apologise to the people as we go where they've been missed. It was an error that they were missed on being put on the agenda. So we'll start with. So this should have been a question on notice, and it is signed by. I haven't added them up, but maybe near a dozen people in Orford, ratepayers of Orford. Question 1 is to the Acting General Manager. What has been the total cost to ratepayers for the following items related to area signed Orford Bird Sanctuary, which was installed without ratification by Council at an ordinary council meeting and without public consultation? 1, the fencing and re-fencing of the Orford Sand Spit along the walkway track. 2, the Prosser River Mouth Master Plan, October 2018 by Gilby Bruin, commissioned by NRM Manager Miss Mel Kelly. The report by a consultant on submissions to the proposal for management of the Orford Sand Spit and Beach. And 4, signage, labour and equipment usage by council staff for installing and monitoring fencing. General Manager, you'll take that on notice?
Correct.
Question 2 is, so this is addressed to Councillor Cheryl Arnold as Chairperson of the Natural Resources Committee. So I'll just read it as it is, but understanding that the question will be taken on notice and by the General Manager. As Chairperson of the Natural Resources Committee, were you aware of the incremental fencing on the Orford Sand Spit and along the walking track? And if so, were you not concerned that this matter for ratification since the Prosser River Mouth Master Plan, October 2018, had been commissioned from Gilby Bruin and 75% implemented? This was clearly a strategic and not an operational matter. So that question will be taken on notice.
Correct.
Question 3 is to the Acting General Manager. The council staff were deployed within 12 to 24 hours last year to erect and re-erect fencing along the walking track and to protect nests outside existing fencing areas. Why do the temporary stakes and signage, which are falling down, still remain in place? Again, on notice. So as I said, there's approximately 12 people or more listed there who've asked those questions. That's why 3 have been allowed. The next question is from GV and SM Hodgson. And again, apologies to Mr. and Mrs. Hodgson. This came in time to be put on notice, but wasn't picked up. So the question is, Dear Mayor, we ask if you will include the following common law whereby stormwater from a building on a higher property is directed to an adjoining lower property. To the General Manager for an answer, please.
The advice I've been given is that the issue may be addressed by the Plumbing Regulations 2014 and under the Urban Drainage Act 2013 if the property is in an urban area. The general guiding principle is the property owners have an obligation not to concentrate stormwater runoff onto neighbouring properties over and above the natural runoff that would occur.
Thank you. The next one came in, so it is a question without notice, and it came in within the appropriate time frame. I haven't added up the exact amount of signatures that's on this document, but fair to say it's over 30. And as such, there's been 16 questions asked. So I'll read them through. Who initially decided that the council should create a walking track in Buckland? When was that decision made, and what information was before the decision maker at the time? I'll just say straight up here that these will be taken on notice. 2, was the Buckland walking track ever discussed by council prior to its construction, either in council meetings or at council workshops or in any other place? Sorry. And if so, when and what qualified information
Mayor, we have technical problems.
given to council laws under section
We have technical issues.
65
Can't hear us anymore, Debbie.
of the Local Government Act.
Excuse me.
3, other than income. Yes.
We can't.
We have technical.
We can't hear. You're very garbled. It's impossible to understand what's been said, and there's something wrong with the audio here at that end.
Yeah, hold on a moment then. Hold on. It'll be because there's too many computers in here.
I'm gonna go get off Zoom. Yeah, yeah.
You can still be on, but just pick up your computer and
Yeah.
it's just that there's too many. It interferes. And you can be on needs to do the same.
Yeah. Do you want to sit in your office, Dion? Or you guys could go into the other meeting room? It might help.
Or in my office or wherever. So I think this occurs, I think this occurs when there's there's a few of us in the same room here. So we're just making some changes and we'll see. Technology. So has that improved things?
Just keep talking first, and then we'll let you know.
Okay, ABC.
No, it's not really. No, it hasn't. You're still garbled.
Can you move, please? No, you was up there. Oh, maybe it's. Oh, maybe it is. Oh, it actually says my connection is unstable. So maybe it's the weather. Now, how are we going now? Better? Okay. So the acting general manager has moved away from me. That's improved things.
I don't know how, but might not be able to.
Well, it's probably not you.
It hasn't improved things a lot.
Computer. So you just need to zip along.
Do you think that it's
Okay.
you're
So
still garbled, Debbie?
It's still a problem, folks.
Just see if mine's any better. Oh,
am I not?
is she not?
Council laws, internet access, am I?
Yeah, same as mine. Just see if mine's.
How do I hide
Because
the
mine's
menu?
not staying on unstable.
Can you hear me now? Just mute yours.
That didn't help. That was with you. That was with.
And now we've got a lot of feedback from you.
I'm turning that.
Interesting. Maybe you need to go right away from me.
Yeah, I might just go into my
Just
office.
yeah.
Sorry.
Okay.
Debbie, you keep,
I'm meeting the acting general manager now.
but you keep freezing.
Oh, I'm here.
You've got your finger up your nose. Sorry.
Premier Gutwin, can we please get back to meeting face to face?
Debbie, you've frozen.
So, am I still frozen?
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to see if I can connect through my phone. Okay, it might be the internet connection here. Hold the line. Me? Oh. It's really horrible to hear people talking there. I might be. Do you want me to see if it's my phone first? I might just do it on my phone. Right. Bear with me. Wrong one.
Now, my connection's pretty good, isn't it?
Yep.
It's Rob. Excellent. So that's sitting in my office. It's fine.
I was just going to. Yes, we'll adjourn for 5 minutes, but just don't go anywhere, okay? So we'll just turn off the recording while we'll sort out our issues. The acting general manager will run back to her office and turn off the recording. Now, if I go out of front of the Buckland people's questions, okay? Marissa, you right to hit
Recording.
Yep. So reconvene at 2:25. Technical issues seem to have been resolved. So I'm going to start again with the Buckland questions. So questions from Buckland residents, there's approximately 30 signatures and there's 16 questions in total. I'm going to read them, but they're going to be taken on notice. Number 1, who initially decided that the council should create a walking track in Buckland? When was the decision made and what information was before the decision maker at that time? 2, was the Buckland walking track ever discussed by council prior to its construction, either in council meetings or at workshops or in any other place? And if so, when and what qualified information was given to councillors under Section 65 of the Local Government Act? 3, other than in council's meeting agenda for its September 2018 meeting as a single line item in the capital works budget for an amount of $32,000, including a $10,000 government grant, and in the annual report for 2017-2018, Part A, page 22, where it appears as a single line item in regards to the $10,000 grant from DPAC, has the Buckland walking track ever been addressed in any formal council documents, in brackets, agenda, minutes and the like, or on the council's website? 4, was the proposal for the Buckland walking track advertised? 5, why was there no consultation with the Buckland community before or after a decision was made to construct a walking track in Buckland? 6, see the attached map at number 1. Who costed the historic church walk at $10,000 and the river walk at $32,000, and were the costings updated prior to construction commencing? 7, who planned the construction of the walking track in Buckland, and were the plans created or approved by an engineer, and if so, what was the name of the engineer? 8, who changed the initial plan for the Buckland walking track, A, by deleting the historic church walk, and why and when was that done? B, by dividing the river walk into 2 stages, and why and when was that done? 9, council's application to Crown Land Services for a works permit for the track specifies a 1.5 metre wide track. Why wasn't the track limited to a maximum of 1.5 metres? 10, why was it necessary to gouge out a large area along the rivulet to create the track, turning a beautiful verge into an eyesore visible from the highway? 11, did council authorise a council officer to door knock in Buckland on the 18th of March 2020 during business hours and in a council vehicle in the company with former councillor Brett Steiner, asking Buckland residents to sign a letter of support for the track? 12, what is the total cost to date of stage 1 of the walking track, including the labour cost of council staff? 13, does council intend to undertake stage 2 of the walking track, and is council aware that Buckland residents with a deep knowledge and historical connection with the land around the track assert that both stages 1 and 2 will be subject to flooding? 14, did council have in place all appropriate permits and authorisations before construction of the track commenced? 15, did council authorise any of its officers to challenge Crown Land Services' decision in relation to a strong recommendation from Heritage Tasmania that council undertake an Aboriginal Heritage Consulting Archaeologist assessment of the track site, and if so, why? 16, against the background of strong community complaints about the track, including complaints relating to construction flaws and safety, and the construction works being put on hold to allow council to investigate the matter, did council authorise the submission of the attached acquittal declaration in respect of a state government grant? That is the end of the questions. As I say, all taken on notice. There's a further question from Mr. De La Torre from the Australian Services Union. And these have been, the question's been reduced. It was particularly long, and it's been reduced down to a straight question. In reference to the recommendation in item 7.9 of today's agenda, that questions in public question time are limited to 2 per person, whether given on notice or without notice in the meeting, Mr. De La Torre asks, why is it in this council, where councillors and mayor were elected on a platform of bringing more accountability and transparency, that the public will have such a restriction placed upon them? That question will be taken on notice. Correct, Acting
Yes.
General Manager? Thank you. Question 2, with reference to Council's decision to withdraw from ownership and management of the visitor information centres by the end of October 2020, Mr. De La Torre asks, will Council consider this decision and continue to support the ongoing viability of tourism operators in your area by maintaining the visitor information centres whilst looking at ways of bringing the centres to a cost-neutral position? Acting General Manager?
You've taken on notice.
That's the end of 3.1. Moving on to 3.2, question 1. I'm going to read the question. The Acting General Manager will read the response. This is from Mr. John Heck. The question is, the evidence has been provided to the most inappropriate inclusion of the Howes Hill 9 lots held in trust within the Marina Views estate. When will Council remove the 9 lots, rezone the whole area as recreational open space and provide the engineers, roadworks specifications for the formation of Spencer Street between Roberts and Selwyn Streets, providing safe access for the Tribunal lookout for the site to be shovel ready for funding of COVID-19 $1.8 billion Regional Infrastructure Fund. The combined community project is for a lookout, bus, car parking, sensory terraced gardens and walkways, and welcome signage visible to the Tasmanian Highway.
In response to part 1 of Mr. Heck's question, there are 2 bundles of land owned by Council on Howes Hill. Both consist of 11 ordinary titles, a central starfish shaped lot and roads. All 22 residential lots are owned by Council as ordinary land. Lot 94 and 85, the reserves and the roads, were transferred to Council by the Housing Department in November 1979. Lots 62 to 67 were transferred to Council from Housing in June 2003. Lots 25 to 27, 28 to 35 and 68 to 72 were transferred to Council from Housing in November 2013. If land is held in trust, it is generally noted on the transfer documents. There is no indication on any of the above transfer documents that land was to be or is held in trust. In response to part 2 of Mr. Heck's questions about the combined community project, a search of Council's records has indicated that since 2002, there have been various requests from Council to the applicant for further information in respect to a development application lodged relating to the parcel of land mentioned in Mr. Heck's question. The development application was subsequently placed on hold until 2005 and finally withdrawn by the Lions Club in 2014.
Thank you. Question 2, procedural failure resulting time wasting exercise. How many employees of GSBC are represented by the Australian Union who, under the cloak, or should I, I'm not even going to read that bit, of council transparency is running, I believe, an endless campaign, taking up valuable time for what is so laughably sad to any ratepayer with knowledge of previous administration's management. The availability of uncensored whole minutes prior to inclusion within the agenda is to be applauded by ratepayers and I think the ASU. Can you respond?
As this matter relates to personal choice of individual council employees, council is not in a position to respond. With respect to your comments regarding the availability of minutes, council resolved at the ordinary council meeting held on the 26th of May 2020 to make the unconcerned long minutes of a council meeting, other than a closed meeting, publicly available via council's website at least 2 weeks before the next ordinary council meeting.
Thank you. There's a question from Mr. Jon Kickert. Could you please, in the interest of transparency and accountability to GSBC ratepayers, provide them a comprehensive itemised list of the names and fees of each and every external consultant report and legal service incurred by GSBC since October 2018?
With respect to the provision of names and fees of each and every external consultant report, any agreement between council and external provider is considered to be commercial in confidence and therefore council is not at liberty to make that information publicly available. Legal services incurred by Glamorgan Spring Bay Council are considered to be both commercial in confidence and of a confidential nature. Any decision to make such information publicly available would be a decision of council.
Thank you. I have a further question from Ms. Karen Tantari of the Australian Services Union. Ms. Bevilacqua, that will make a sound on here if we ruffle papers, just the paper sound. Yeah. I note with disappointment that council has limited the number of questions that Mr. De La Torre can ask on notice to 2, as is the case with questions without notice. Limiting the number of questions that can be asked only leads to lesser accountability. Can council please provide a reason for limiting the number of questions that the public can ask on notice, as the legislation and regulation provide for no such ability, and I can find no records of any such limit having applied to any other person in the past?
Council has set out its policy on public question time in its document, Public Question Time, How Do I Ask a Question, which is on Council's website. This states that there is a limit of 2 questions per person. This refers to all questions to be dealt with in public question time, not just questions without notice, and is in accordance with the Local Government Meeting Procedures Regulations 2015, Regulation 31(7), which allows the council to determine any other procedure to be followed in respect to public question time at an ordinary council meeting. This measure is in place to try and ensure that all persons have a reasonable opportunity to have a question heard and answered. To understand the reasoning behind this, one need only to go to the minutes and the recording of the April 2020 ordinary council meeting. On this occasion, the Mayor agreed to allow more than 2 questions per person. Mr. De La Torre submitted 3 questions without notice, which were answered in the meeting. This took just over 6 minutes of the 15 minutes usually allowed for public question time, or 40% of the time. In addition, Mr. De La Torre submitted 9 questions on notice, which are obligingly answered in writing before the agenda was published. I did not keep track on how long this took, but it's safe to say it was not the work of a moment. This shows that allowing an unlimited number of questions by any member of the public is not practicable, given that questions provided on notice before the meeting require staff time to research and answer in writing before the agenda is published. Similarly, in an ordinary council meeting, there is time set aside for public questions, but it cannot be unlimited. It is therefore seen to be equitable to limit questions to 2 per person.
And second question is, and secondly, I'm interested in an answer to Mr. De La Torre's question on notice. Could the members of the Section 24 Statement of Expectations Committee please explain how employees should feel protected by the final Statement of Expectations, or how they can feel understood, given that their very frank and honest input in interviews with Mr. Priest was never reported on in any of the committee meetings, and with comments such as those made by Ms. Mason in Council's April Council meeting, showing that even at the end of the 6-month ordeal, those intimately involved in the committee to address these concerns and the setting of the Statement of Expectations still have no idea what the original issues were on why ratepayers' money has been spent on such a statement being developed in the first place.
Interviews with members of staff and the councillors were confidential, which may explain why they were able to be frank and honest, as stated. The interviews were conducted to provide a basis for the clauses included in the Statement of Expectations. It would have been grossly unfair to publicise the details of those confidential interviews, and it's difficult to see how an employer would have felt protected by having such details revealed in open meetings and on Council's website. There is a range of legislation to protect employees. The Statement of Expectations was never intended to replace such legislation, but it does contain guidelines for proper behaviour which are relevant to all employees and their relationships with elected members. I refer you to Section 3 and 4 of the Statement of Expectations. Council does not agree with your assertion that the members of the Statement of Expectations Committee and other councillors have no idea what the original issues were. Sufficient guidance was provided by the Director in his original advice to the General Manager. In the 4 months from January to April 2020, when the SOE was being prepared, a wide range of matters between the Mayor, councillors and General Manager were discussed, and this is reflected in the signed document. Council disagrees with your labelling of the SOE process as an ordeal. A lot has been learned by both councillors and the General Manager during this process, and Council is working steadily to address outstanding matters. The Mayor, councillors and the incumbent General Managers during this time have worked willingly and constructively, not as those undergoing a prolonged and unpleasant experience as you infer. Council sought external help to assist with the SOE as recommended by the Director of Local Government. All councils and government engage outside services when necessary.
This is the final question. And it's quite long. And going forward, I think we need to look at what, I mean, I'm just going to say this. Up until now, I've been reading the question and the answer, but we're 40 minutes into the meeting and we haven't really kicked into the meeting itself yet. We haven't got past this point. So I think going forward, we'll ensure that the key points are highlighted and that's what will be read in the meeting. So, but on this occasion, I'm going to read this whole one. The Executive Committee FAI question 1. It's a long question. We are writing in regard to the 2020 financial year capital works budget and the funds allocated to Coles Bay for roadworks and not yet spent. There appears to be approximately $40,000 not yet spent. However, it has been budgeted to be spent in Coles Bay over the roadworks and road sealing budgets. For the last 9 years, the FAI have been asking Council to address a pedestrian versus vehicle safety issue along the Esplanade in Coles Bay, between the two intersections of Harold Street passing the commercial jetty, with no workable solution being reached in that time. Last year, the FAI presented a proposal to Council to install traffic calming devices along the Esplanade between both intersections of Harold Street. Our request was declined at the time of the submission, as Council stated they could not afford this. The cost quoted to the FAI was approximately $30,000 by Tony Pollard on July 2nd, 2019. In that email, Tony also advised FAI that the proposal had been in workshop discussions but had not made it to the annual budget. No explanation as to why this did not make it to the annual budget was provided. We've attached the original proposal for your reference. Please also speak to Deputy Mayor Woods, as she was at the FAI meeting where this proposal was voted on by our members. We are now nearing the end of the financial year and we can see monies allocated on the capital works budget to Coles Bay and not spent that Coles Bay could use to install these traffic calming devices. Please don't fall into the trap that the last council did, budgeting for capital works in Coles Bay and never even attempting to complete the works and fulfil budget commitments. Completing this project under this year's budget would have an excellent goodwill gesture to the ratepayers of Coles Bay, who have suffered a decade of austerity measures, despite representing 17% of the financial rate base of Glamorgan Spring Bay, contributing $1.065 million this financial year in general rates, with only $45,000 of that being spent so far this financial year on capital works, or 4.2% of our general rate contribution coming back in capital works. We know that this council is trying to avoid the errors of the past. Completing this project with the balance of this year's budgeted funds would show the Coles Bay voters and ratepayers that this new council is learning the lessons of the past, making fundamental changes and avoiding repeating the same mistakes that have infuriated ratepayers in the region over the last decade, with regard to items on the capital works budget never being completed in Coles Bay and our budget allocation not being fulfilled. From a personal perspective, it would also be appreciated as it was the last major work that Adrian O'Sullivan, a former FAI executive member, completed on behalf of the FAI before he sadly passed away last year. It would be wonderful for the community and for Adrian's family to know that Adrian's final effort for the community has paid off. Will Council please consider these works under this year's budget? If those funds budgeted and not yet spent are earmarked for another roads project in Coles Bay before the end of the financial year, please advise the FAI what that project is and when it will be undertaken. If the monies budgeted is not to be spent at all this financial year, please advise why the FAI proposed traffic calming devices cannot be installed under this year's budget. We look forward to the Council's response.
The matter is under consideration by council officers to be included in the Coles Bay foreshore project, which will commence in the coming year with an anticipated completion date of September 2021.
Thank you, and that brings us to the end of that section. Moving on to item 4, Planning Authority section. Under Regulation 25 of the Local Government Meeting Procedures Regulations 2015, I hereby declare that the Council is now acting as a planning authority under the provisions of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993, with Section 3 of the agenda. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Simons?
Council now acts as a planning authority at 244.
Thank you. Somebody to second, please. Councillor Robinson? Put the motion. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. Item 4.1, Development Application 2019/334. There is a recommendation on page 33. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Churchill?
I move that pursuant to Section 57 of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993, the Glamorgan Spring Bay Interim Planning Scheme 2015 Development Application 2019/334 for expansion, modifications and intensification of use at 16017 Tasman Highway, Absalom, Devil's Corner, CT 115708/4 be approved with the following conditions: 1 to 16 and general notes and advice A to H.
Thank you. And somebody to second, please. Councillor Simons? Councillor Churchill, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Look, this development seems to me to be the continuation of a previous development. It's an expansion. For the most part, the building is in keeping with the existing architecture that's there. It's low and it's long, with the exception of the second tower, which I agree with. I don't see that as being anything but architectural. It's been a very good asset to the community this far. So I think, yes, I'll support this motion.
Councillor Simons, do you wish to speak?
I agree with Councillor Churchill's sentiments there totally, and I'll certainly be supporting it.
Thank you. So any councillor that wishes to speak against? Councillor Brenny, if you could unmute.
I don't consider this speaking against. I will be supporting the motion, but I do have, I would appreciate if I could have some planning advice as to what I've just read in relation to the engineer's report, there was a representation in relation to traffic generated at the intersection of Tasman Highway and Sherborne Road. And there's a statement made in relation to the intensification or increase in traffic caused by the use, considering that there's substantially more car parking bays and considering the increase in traffic of Tasman Highway over the last few years. But it says in there that the intersection of Tasman Highway and Sherborne, this is the engineer's response to a question in relation to increase in traffic. The intersection of Tasman Highway and Sherborne Road has been upgraded by the Department of State Growth as part of the Great Eastern Drive project, and the safety and efficiency of the intersection has increased rather than decreased. And in another statement in the same report, it indicates that that upgrade was done recently. Can you advise me as to how recently that was? Because I can't recall if that situation was done in relation to this development.
Hi, it's Robin here. That upgrade was very recent, Councillor Churchill. We, oh, is it? Sorry. Where is he? Ah, there you are. Yes, it's very recent. In fact, we only discovered that ourselves over the last couple of weeks, that it actually has been done. The Department of State Growth themselves had advised us that it was not going to be done for some while, and then a couple of days later we discovered that actually it has been done and completed. So it's over the last, since definitely over the last month or two, over COVID I'd say, because we haven't been up there all that time. I haven't seen it, and that's been sort of since March, I guess. Deputy Mayor Jenny Brooks, got her hand up.
Yes, you can share. Deputy Mayor Wood, you had a question?
Just a further comment to Councillor Breeny's question. I was up that way just this weekend, and the turn-off upgrades that they've done at Devil's Corner have also been done at Milton as well. So if you have gone past, maybe, well, you go past Milton, it would have been around that same time, because of the signage is still there. You've still got to do 60 and all that sort of stuff, so it's only relatively new.
Councillor Breeny?
Through the Mayor, yes, I live about 1 kilometre from the intersection. I'm concerned about whether, my concern is not so much whether or not works have been done there, but whether or not a traffic impact assessment, as is usual in case where you have increased commercial parking movements, etc., whether or not that was either required or unnecessary based on the new design. Now, whether or not the new design that was undertaken takes into account, the new work that was done at the intersection was undertaken as part of just general works that were upgrading Tasman Highway, which has happened at Milton, it's happened in various locations, including Coles Bay Road, etc. What I'm questioning is whether or not the works that were undertaken in the knowledge of this development that we're about to approve. In usual circumstances, when planning is undertaken, when a development is undertaken like this, one of the requirements of the developer is that they provide information to show that the traffic movements aren't going to create a hazard. And that's usually in the form of a traffic impact assessment. I would assume that, you know, I'm making an assumption from an engineering point of view that it may well be a compliant intersection, but it requires for there to be some sort of certification that that is the case. I'm just hoping that this development either takes that into account when the conditions are being drawn up for the development, that the existing upgraded, if it is, intersection complies with requirements for this sort of development. That's my only concern. Thank you.
Yes, through the Mayor. We referred the application to the Department of State Growth, and we asked specifically if they would require an updated traffic impact assessment because they had provided one for the 2015 developments. And the Department of State Growth advised that they didn't need an upgraded traffic impact assessment, and because they had the improvements and upgrades already planned, and that's how we moved forward on that basis.
Thank you. That answers my question. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Councillor Simons have a question. Any other discussions?
No.
Thank you. Are there any further questions for the planner? Councillor Browning?
I've just got a comment, that's all, not through the Mayor. I can understand the concerns that were raised by the representor, and I think, you know, there's historical context to the concerns of that representor. With the building heights on page 22 and 3, where Miss Bev Lacqua talks about how she thinks the two towers will contribute positively to the rural landscape. And then on page 33 has the concerns from the representor. Miss Bev Lacqua responds to landscaping, with landscaping no plans, which came from the representor, and says that the views and the scenic beauty of the place is the major attraction. So for me, I will be voting for it, but for me, why do you need another tower? That scene is just spectacular on its own. And also I looked up the control of obstructive effect. Oh, I've got it. Sorry. And I found it really not very easy to understand the Australian standards.
Anyone that's listening, Councillor Browning's just sorting out a dog. It's a pup. No, Councillor Browning.
Sorry, that took the blue pig. Now I'm completely flummoxed.
You found it hard understanding the Australian standards?
Yeah, I did find it hard understanding the Australian standards. I printed it out, and a lot of it, the standards do not apply to a lot of the things like outdoor lighting. So for people who, you know, if they choose not to turn their lights off, there's no reason for them not to do so, I don't think. So, you know, I mean, so yeah, I just find it, you know, the community people don't get a lot of say with the interim planning scheme is what it is, and we have to follow it.
Yeah, yeah. Just remembering, Councillor Browning, to let you with your planning authority hat on to make it relevant to this application. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that will be it. No further. Councillor Breeny, you're on mute.
If I'm permitted to make another question or at least a statement in relation before I vote, I just wondered, in this report, there is no mention of the maintenance of public access to Sherborne Road, where 2 of the 3 accesses to the Devil's Corner come from. Sherborne Road is a Crown Reserve road, and I understand that the Crown has vigorously defended maintaining public access to that road all the way down to the Walsh family graveyard at the end of the vineyard, and access road that actually reaches the foreshore of Malting Lagoon towards the Cusick property. Through the Mayor, is it possible for the planner to indicate whether or not there was any comment whatsoever made during this development to restrict access to Sherborne Road?
No, there wasn't.
Thank you.
I promise that's what Ms. Bevilacqua said. So, okay. On that, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? To unanimous. Thank you. Oh, yeah. Sorry, I should have said, does the Speaker wish to close debate? But obviously, Councillor Churchill, you're right. It's too late now anyway. Under Regulation 25 of the Local Government Meeting Procedures Regulation 2015, I hereby declare that the Council is no longer acting as the planning authority under the provisions of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993 for Section 3 of the agenda. A motion, please. Deputy Mayor.
Yes, I'll move that Council no longer acts as a planning authority at 2:59.
Thank you. And somebody to second, please. Councillor Simons, put the motion. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to page 38, which is the financials, noting that Ms. Bevilacqua was leaving the meeting at 3:01 p.m. So page 38, 5.1, financial reports for the period ending 31 May 2020. I'll run through these pages, and if there's any questions, please indicate so. Any questions on page 38 or 39? Councillor Simons?
Yes, through you, the Mayor, I have just some questions for our Acting General Manager. In the notes in note number 5 on the profit and loss on page 39, we've got an increase in revenue of 28%, and it's primarily due to higher than expected revenue from medical income, commission earned and rental income. I was just wondering what the breakdown is there in the medical side of it. Commissions would be information centre commissions, and the rentals, does that include the marina? I was just wondering how that breaks down, that amount.
Probably to give a detailed breakdown, I'll take that on notice. Through there.
Is it?
It wouldn't include marina revenue
Okay.
in the rental, more rental of buildings, in answer to that part of the question. And commission comes from a number of sources, so I can give a more detailed breakdown.
Yep, sure. A ballpark breakdown.
Councillor Simons, that's not appropriate. The Acting General Manager has advised that she'll put it in writing to you and provide a more detailed. We don't want really want a ballpark figure and a guess in a council meeting.
Fair. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I suppose I'll just explain myself. I just was interested for a matter that's coming up further along in the agenda as far as those costs. It would have helped me make a decision. And still on page 39, just to help me understand it a little bit, employee costs are down 11%. Could you give me an explanation through you, the Mayor, to our Acting General Manager, a definition of materials and services?
Materials and services make up a large proportion of council's costs, everything from contractors, legal fees, printing, stationery, rent and lease fees, land tax, a large number of items that that we may need to pay for.
Okay.
Anything that doesn't fall into, we try not to put things into other where we can. Majority of things fall into materials and services and aren't employee costs.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions on those 2 pages? Moving on to page 40 and 41. (42), 43. Councillor Browning.
Down the bottom, events, right down the bottom, we've got spent was the 8,600 and we had 30,000 for that, which was that grant money. I'm just wondering, does that have to be spent on events or can it be reallocated, sorry, through the Mayor to the Acting General Manager?
Through you, Mayor. It's part of the $1 million drought relief grant, and that's part of one whole package of projects, and we're allowed to allocate that amongst the approved projects as necessary, so it can go to others as needed. Yep.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor, you had a question?
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Acting General Manager. On page 42, under roads and footpaths, it says Saltworks Road, bitumen ceiling 700 metres, 45,000. Budget estimate was 45,000. It's a completed project in 2018-19, but it's only been invoiced $215 by the looks of it. Or is that so? Are there more invoices to come with regards to this one?
Through you, Mayor, that was a carry forward project from last year, part of a bigger project, and the previous works manager had brought forward some funds thinking there were additional invoices to come, but most of it we managed to capture into last financial year. There was only a minor amount that ended up being carried, that expended in this year. And the works are complete.
With regards to, if I may, Mayor, again underneath the PG walking track cemeteries, with regards to the dog exercise yards, they're all 80 and 90% completed. And so what are we waiting for them to be complete?
Through you, Mayor, my understanding from the project manager for that area is it's mainly the plumbing of the water for the dog water troughs, I guess you'd call them, and signage, and they're complete.
Thank you.
Councillor Churchill, you had your hand up next.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to the Acting General Manager, through you, Mayor, just a quick one. It's pretty trivial, but on the Dolphin Sands line, which is on page 42, second line down, probably a bit of description in there would be nice if that's okay. Sorry about that. My other questions have been asked by other people so far. Thank you.
And Councillor Simons, you had a question?
Apologies. Madam Mayor, I need to wonder if we could go back to page 40, page 41. I was a little slow getting my hand up. And if I could direct a question to our Acting General Manager.
I'll just hold on a sec, Councillor Simon, so we can go there. As soon as I finish with 42 and 43, Deputy Mayor, did you have another question?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. If I may, again, with regards to the, on page 43, with regards to stormwater and drainage Orphan Ribbon Road, I believe that this money has been attributed and was agreed on our capital renewal for an issue that's out at Shelley Beach. And I think, if I may, Mr. Rob Brunning has been in discussion with the people that it is pertained to. And I was just wondering if that money is going to, or that allocated funds is going to go to where this was allocated for. That's a bit convoluted, I know that, but it's, yeah, just if we could have an answer for that one. It's $12,000.
Acting General Manager, do you have the answer to that, or Mr. Brunning?
I could comment, but would Rob, the Works Manager, like to comment, Mr. Brunning?
Yes, I'm still researching the matter. However, what I've found so far is there isn't a detailed design done, but there was further costing of it after that $12,000 was allocated, and it wasn't found to be sufficient to do the planned works. And really, we feel, both myself and the engineer, development engineer, that further investigation needs to be done. And this investigation is really part of the stormwater management plan and the modelling that's required in the area to understand the issues. Yeah.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. If I may, I'm just sort of fighting the fight, not fighting the fight, I don't know, it's supporting the people that this is attributed to. This has been going on for 8 years with them constantly being in touch with council with regards to their flooding issue out there at West Shelley, and there is a significant amount of frustration coming from them and surrounding neighbours. So I just wanted to let everyone know that this is an issue out there for them. Thank you.
Okay. Radio. So no further questions on page 42 and 43. Okay, going back to page 41, Councillor Simons.
Yes, through you, the Mayor, to our Acting General Manager. Just an explanation probably from my own self. On the top of page 40, we've got cash and cash equivalents as at the 31st of May. Is that our holdings of cash in an account at that point?
Yes, predominantly that is money held in cash.
Yep. And are there expenses to go against that before the year's over? Will that change?
Yes.
And do we know, is there a budgeted amount that will go against that?
I couldn't tell you an exact figure off the top of my head. On average, we go through around $1 million a month.
Okay, all right.
It'll be a mixture of operating and capital expenses still to be incurred.
Yes, so it's approximately $1 million.
There's part of the budget documents will have a forecast to 30 June.
Thank you.
Moving forward to page 44. Any questions? Okay, no questions on page 44. There's a recommendation back on page 38. If I could have a motion, please. Councillor Browning.
I move that Council receives and notes the financial reports as attached to this report for the period ending the 31st of May 2020.
Thank you. Somebody to second, please. Councillor Robinson. There's no further comment. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to 6.1 on page 45, there's the Section 24 Committee Draft Statement of Expectation Committee meeting minutes from the 15th of June 2020. There is a recommendation on page 48. However, there is a motion contained on page 46. So if somebody moves a motion, could they please consider the motion, it's the bottom motion with 2 points on page 46, that maybe they may wish to move that as the first motion, and then we'll have the second part of the motion. Does that make sense? Councillor Arnold, did you want to move something? No. So we've got, there's a motion on page 46. So for council to agree with that, somebody needs to move it as a motion of the council, and it needs to be endorsed. So, sorry, Councillor Arnold, you're shaking your head. Would you like to say something?
No, not particularly, Mayor. I think there's a way. I mean, I'm not totally sure how we pick up motions out of Section 24 committee. I'm concerned about the process that we undertake to do this. I think personally, I think the only way that it can be done is that when the recommendation is moved, that part of the recommendation of accepting the unconfirmed minutes is that council notes and endorses the motions at 3.B and 3.C. I don't think as a council we can reasonably move those motions, but I'll take that on notice.
Okay, so there is a recommendation there. Clearly it's a motion to council. So personally I feel that, and we've done it in the past, and I have spoken to Ms Walters about this and asked if she could please check the minutes and bring them forward within the recommendation. And it was missed in this occasion. I asked for that to occur after this agenda was printed. However, I think it's not a particularly controversial motion. I think it's pretty basic, and I think if council wishes to move on that motion today, it would be fair and reasonable to do so. So is there anyone that wishes to move a motion in respect to the motion on page 46 under 3B? Councillor Browning? Councillor Browning, just take yourself off mute.
Sorry. I move that Council investigates the provision of training providers for A, body language, B, personality definition. 2, invites Mayor Christy Johnson to speak with Council and the Acting General Manager regarding the Glenorchy City Council Statement of Expectation.
Thank you. Could I have somebody to second that motion? Councillor Robinson? Councillor Browning, would you like to speak to your motion?
I'd just like to say I can't see a problem with either number 1 or 2 pursuing that. I'm more than happy.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson? Off mute, please.
Sorry. Yes, Mayor, as an observer at that meeting, we had a fair discussion about these points and, you know, a lot of positive discussion about those things that are being proposed by Councillor Browning. So I think it's really worthwhile for us to support it.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against the motion? For the motion? Councillor Browning, do you wish to close debate? I'll put the motion. All those for? It's unanimous. Thank you. Now moving on to, there is a recommendation on page 48. Would somebody like to move a motion, please? Councillor Brenny.
Point of order, Mayor, if I may.
Yeah.
There are 2 motions contained within this report. Did you want to have that motion that's 3C, protocols for implementing the SOE, dealt with on page 47?
3C, you say?
Yes.
I think that was agreed that was really, I did speak with Ms Mason about this, and 3B was the only one that was really was a council decision. This is just an internal process of workings within the Section 24 committee,
Thank you.
the 3C.
Thank you.
But thanks for checking. Okay, so we got to Councillor Brini. Motion, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that the draft unconfirmed minutes of the Statement of Expectations Committee meeting held on the 5th of June 2020 be received and noted.
Thank you. Somebody to second, please. Deputy Mayor. Put the motion. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you. Item 7.1, the funding and prioritising of projects in the coming year and the need for long-term financial and asset planning to inform decision making. There is a recommendation on page 51. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Simons?
I'd like to put forward that the council notes this recommendation.
We've got that. Yeah. Thank you. Do I have anyone to second that motion? Councillor Arnold? Do you wish to speak to your motion, Councillor Simons?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to say it's a good report, and I think we should note it as councillors and be aware of it. I don't think we should lock ourselves into that position. I think each project should be taken on its merit. The officer's recommendation doesn't allow us any flexibility to examine any new proposed assets that don't fall under the recommendation. And by committing to that, we might, inadvertently, it might not allow us to take advantage of a change in circumstances. I can't see any good reason or benefit not to do that. So I think we could end up losing the opportunity to take advantage of potential funding, for example. So I see no reason to lock that in, and I think we should look at each project on its merit.
Just wanted to check with you, Councillor Simons. You did say the word "in general" there, didn't you? That the council for the next financial year, at least in general only.
Yes.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Councillor Arnold, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Thank you, I do. Given recent correspondence that council's received, I question whether we actually have 12 months to develop the asset management plan, the long-term financial plan and the stormwater management plan. I can't reasonably make a decision to only fund the items in the motion when council's finances in the light of COVID-19 are very much crystal ball. Under the Local Government Act, we have the capacity to vary our budget estimates at any time. So why do we need to make a decision today that will only fund in general the items listed? Why can't we revisit this in, say, 3 to 6 months? Whilst I think I'm probably being a little bit overly optimistic, I would hope that our finances may not be as dire as we are predicting at the moment. So I'd support Councillor Simons's motion.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against the motion? Councillor Churchill?
Yes, Mayor, I just think that that there's big messages to be sent here. I think that we need to have some plan as to where we are going for at least the next year. As the recommendation has been put, that the council for the next year, at least in general, only fund the things that are going to be actually absolutely necessary for us to fund. In other words, we're not going to be in a position where we have the luxury to fund a lot of things that we might like to fund or that might be nice to fund. And I think we need to come through I won't support the motion to just receive this report. Thank you.
Okay, so just to confirm, the word wasn't far different, Councillor Churchill, and not criticising what you're saying, but because this you can't see the motion, and the motion is that council notes this recommendation, just for your information, okay? Not that it makes any difference, Councillor Churchill, same thing, but just confirming the wording. Anyone wish to speak for the motion? Against the motion? Does the mover wish to close debate?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I'll just respond to Councillor Churchill's concerns there. I think he's quite right. In these times, we probably most likely will only look at asset renewal projects that need to be done, but I'm just saying I don't believe we need to lock ourselves into that position. I think as a group, we can decide without being locked in. I think it just gives us no flexibility. Thank you.
I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Councillor Simons, Robinson, Woods and Arnold. And against? Councillor Churchill, Breeny, Browning and Wisby. The motion is lost. Is there, the recommendation still sits, or is there another? Councillor Churchill?
Yes, Mayor, I would like to put the recommendation, if I may.
Yep.
That council for the next financial year at least, in general, only fund asset renewal projects, asset upgrades and new assets that address community safety needs, and that this position be reviewed in 12 months' time.
Thank you. Somebody to second that motion? Councillor Browning? Councillor Churchill, do you wish to speak to the motion?
I think I've already spoken to the motion. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Browning?
Through the Mayor, I'd just like to say, I don't know if it's locking us in. It says in general. So I think, you know, the acting general manager can look at things and council can look at things when they come up. So I'm more than happy to support this recommendation.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against the motion? For the motion? Councillor Breeny?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd simply like to repeat the last paragraph of the report because it to me it explains my support of this motion. Given there are several unknowns regarding council's future financial commitments, unquote, that's the most important thing to me. There are several unknowns, and I believe that those unknowns are very important to deal with, and the best way to deal with them, I believe, is this motion. Going on, quote, council should for the next financial year at least only fund what is absolutely needed for asset renewal and any asset upgrade or new asset for community safety needs only. Council should, not must, and I believe it still leaves us the opening to, if we have to, look at an alternative to not funding anything outside of the parameters of a new asset or whatever. I'll be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. No further speakers. I will support this this motion. I think it's financially prudent thing to do. We don't have an asset management system in place that's anywhere near acceptable at this point, and I fear that we're going to get some level of shock when we do get that asset management system in place, and what our depreciation most probably will be to bring our assets up to the standard required under the Act. So I think if we can reduce probably community expectation and our own expectation in the next 12 months, it's not forever, but it's sort of saying to the community that we're very focused on what's in front of us and not adding anything else onto the desk at the moment. We need to look after what we've got and do it well. So I'll support this motion. I'll put the motion, oh sorry, no I'm not. I'm going to go back to Councillor Churchill. Do you wish to close?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I will close on this occasion. Yeah, the asset management plan and the long-term financial plan, these intersect very closely, and neither of those are sufficiently worked at this point in time for us to just accept unknowns ahead of us that we reasonably can't, might not be able to manage. And I just think some financial responsibility is what we've got to undertake. We're going to have to make a lot of decisions that we're not going to like over the next period. And I think this needs to be really reinforced. And there will be other occasions where similar situations will arise. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Councillor Wisby, Robinson, Churchill, Browning, Greenie. Against? Deputy Mayor Woods, Councillor Simons and Arnold. The motion's carried. Councillors, I need to have, personally, let's call it a 5-minute break. So if we could come back at 2:35, so I'll adjourn for 5 minutes at 3:32, let's say. Come back in 5. Thank you. Is Mr. Brunning and Mr. Bellingham coming back?
They may be coming back, but they're only observing at this stage, so I think we can start without them.
Okay. So we'll reconvene at 3:42 p.m. Item 7.2, 2021 rates resolution resubmitted. There is a recommendation on page 53. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Churchill.
That council, I move that council by absolute majority overturns part 2 of decision 181/20, 26th May 2020, in accordance with the requirements of regulation 18 of the Local Government Meeting Procedures Regulations 2015 as outlined within this report, and adopts the revised 2020-2021 rates resolution as presented in the attachments to this agenda as item 7.2.
Thank you. Do you have any objection to putting the number 1 and 2 at each of those?
No problem. Oh, sorry. That's me.
That's okay. It just makes it a little bit clearer, that's all. Somebody to second that motion, please. Councillor Breeny. Does the mover wish to speak?
This is largely to do, as I understand it, with the technicality. We put that motion through a little bit earlier than we should have, and it's also allowed us to make that adjustment that we needed to make for the $10 on the medical rates. So yeah, I think it fits well with what we need to do at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Breeny. Do you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. My seconding of the motion is on the basis of two things I understand from this report, and it's nothing more than that. That the technicality of not approving this until the 1st of June, that is before the 1st of June, was not in accordance with the Act, and that there is a $10 change to the medical charge. If they are the only two that I can see in this report, then my support of this motion stands. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone wish to speak against the motion? For the Councillor Arnold.
I don't want to speak against the motion, Mayor. I just want some clarification around when councillors were told that there needed to be an increase in the medical charge, because I don't recall when that happened.
Acting General Manager.
This was discussed at a budget workshop. I couldn't tell you the date off the top of my head, and then obviously appearing in the agenda item.
So it's possible that I had signed out of the budget workshop, or
I'm not sure if you were there on that occasion, Councillor Arnold.
Yeah, perhaps it's the one where the forest practice, where I was in another meeting. Yes, could well be.
And my memory of it, Acting General Manager, is that is the sum required to cover the estimated total cost to ratepayers divided by the properties. That's the amount of money required to break even after the ratepayers putting in their bulk sum.
Correct. It was worked out on trying to get on a cost recovery basis.
Thank you. Councillor Simons.
Yeah, I don't particularly wish to speak against the motion either, but Councillor Arnold asked the question I was going to ask as well. But I do have one other question, or two questions actually. The total amount that the $10 raises, what's the lump sum of that amount?
Not a great deal. I'm wondering if I can tell you off the top of my head. Hang on, I'm going to calculate.
Is it probably, isn't it about 6,000? Is it about $60,000? Oh no, it's not. It's $5,400.
Yeah, there's only around, it's less than 6,000 ratepayers paying the medical levy. So yeah, I think it's less than 60,000 that it raises.
Okay, and which brings me back to a question earlier on that was in our financials, that indicated that we'd picked up some increased revenue from the medical centres. Does it take that into account, that we've actually the extra money in the medical centres?
Correct. We've based our forecast from the revenue from medical user charges based on how we've fared this financial year, expecting a similar result, and that slight increase again. It's still just not quite enough to cover the full costs.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Churchill. No further questions, comment. Councillor Churchill, do you wish to close debate? No. Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? It is unanimous. Thank you. Item 7.3, Budget 2020-2021. There is a recommendation on page 56. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Churchill.
I move that that by absolute majority, Council endorse the 2020-2021 budget estimates as attached to agenda item 7.3 of the ordinary meeting of Council 23rd of June 2020, and that the operational budget be reviewed no later than the ordinary council meeting of August 2020.
Okay, can we just go slow on that, please? So there's a second part to the motion. And it starts with that the operational budget. Okay, hold on a moment. We'll just try.
After majority? Sorry.
So yeah, so the motion is the recommendation.
Yeah.
Then another line.
Yep.
That the operational budget
be reviewed no later than the ordinary council meeting, August 2020.
Thank you. Is that clear to everyone? Thank you. And could I have somebody to second that motion, please? Councillor Browning? Councillor Churchill, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, I do. Thank you. This budget is clearly the sort of budget we were going to need in the current circumstances. It's an austerity budget to describe it, I think, at its best. And it's most appropriate, I believe, in the financial situation that we see ourselves in at the moment. Overlaid with all of our issues of COVID and everything else that we were unable to predict, and our advisors, our staff, our financial staff would be finding it very, very hard in this climate to try to estimate exactly what is going to be needed over the next year. We don't know which way it's going to go. We can only make some estimates, some of which won't be probably very accurate when we look back at them in a few months' time. And I do think that it is necessary for us to, the reason I've added that bit extra onto the recommendation is that I think we need to review this fairly frequently throughout the next year. And if we can have a look at it at the end of August, we might be getting an idea of where we're actually going, and if we do need to change anything in our operational budget to make things fit together a little bit better. But we'll know a lot more as time moves forward. So I strongly support this budget as it's been delivered to us. Thank you.
Councillor Browning, do you wish to speak?
Through the Mayor, I'd just like to say I agree with what Councillor Churchill has said, and I also found that the budget loan summary was really easy for somebody that's not very savvy with finances to read. So thank you very much. It made it helpful.
Good. Does any council wish to speak against the motion? Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. It's not necessarily against the motion, it's just a question with regards to it. Is that permissible at this minute?
Yes, of course.
Does this budget, forgive me because I'm trying to find it if it is there, if it's not there, is this including the $60,000 for the East Coast Tourism, Regional Tourism?
Acting General Manager?
I think that is a decision that needs to come back to the table of council.
So it's not in this, it's not been included within this?
There is provision in there for economic development and tourism with the aim with our strategic plan around having an economic development plan and the decision of a previous closed council. So I won't go into the details of that just as yet. So there is a provision of money there if council wish to reallocate that or look at that item, we can bring that to the table.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone wish to speak for the motion? Councillor Arnold?
Like the Deputy Mayor, I'm neither for or against. I have some comments and will involve some questions as well, if that's acceptable.
Sure.
Okay. So my questions are around the statement in the annual plan, in this report at agenda item, at page number 55. It says council will develop its annual plan in the coming months, plural. I'm questioning the time frame for that, because under Section 70 of the Local Government Act, we have to prepare an annual plan, which I believe needs to be in line with our budget estimates. There's no statutory time frame for the annual plan. However, Section 82 requires council to set our budget estimates by no later than the 31st of August. So it's probably a reasonable assumption that the annual plan should be adopted at about the same time. And with respect, not 11 months down the track, which is what happened with the 2018-2019 annual plan. In terms of communication, I think it's reasonable that we do everything listed on page 56. But the major communication of the budget should be through the adoption of the annual plan. And I think there would be an expectation on the Director of Local Government and the Director of Public Health that they received the annual plan within that time frame, that August 31 time frame. I guess a question around it is, if we're divesting council of various areas of operation, then why has the employee costs under operating expenses increased by about $700,000? The 1920 forecast is 4.79 million and the 2021 budget is 5.48 million.
Councillor Arnold, what page are you referring to when you're
right, it's on page 57 on the profit and loss. So unless I'm reading that terribly wrong, and I'm happy to be corrected by the Acting General Manager on that. And my other question is in relation to justification of spending on assets. The statement, it seems to be a little bit at odds with the last paragraph in item 7.1. If we're in saving mode, how can we justify spending over 250,000 on a backhoe and 3 utes or work vehicles on page 63? I realise they may have popped up under some asset renewal program, although I'm not totally sure we've got one of those. I know that it was, in terms of the vehicles, it was a unwritten rule, if you like, of a former general manager that they be traded in at about 80,000 K. But can it be reasonably argued that in the current financial climate, we actually do have to trade them in? Why can't we retain them for another 12 months? And that's $250,000 that we would effectively save.
So, Councillor Arnold, just on one of those points, I think it actually is in our policy that I think they're traded in at the 80, at around the 80. It's actually in the current policy that we have. But I'm going to throw the questions across to Ms. Walters.
I can just see if I can keep up with all the questions. It may be if I go backwards and then you can remind me what I missed. In relation to the vehicles, they've been flagged by the mechanic as seriously outside the policy. Most of them are over 100,000 Ks and probably more like 5 or 6 years old, some requiring significant works. And so just from an OH&S safety perspective, you know, it's part of providing a safe workplace. These, while there are probably others that might need doing as well, these were sort of in the really need to be done category. So that's where the utes fell into that. In relation to employee costs, and again, I very much support some of Councillor Churchill's comments that there are a lot of unknowns that we're trying to forecast in the coming 12 months, and reviews points will need to be had during the year. This year's employee costs are significantly down due to a number of vacancies, and to meet our core responsibilities, we need to create some new roles. We're sort of lacking and very reliant on contractors in some spaces, and there's hopefully, as some of those roles are filled, in the longer term, we'll start to see some savings. So again, that's probably something that will need to be reviewed during the year. In relation to the comments around the annual plan, I agree, and I'd like to see it be going to hopefully the August meeting if we can make that happen.
And a backhoe.
The backhoe, I'm not sure if the works manager can comment. I know the works supervisor has previously given me a briefing on it, but that was some time ago. Mr. Brunning, can you add any further comments on that? And they're the gross costs as well, not taking into account the trade-in, because that'll hit a different line item if there's trade-in.
No, sorry, I can't add anything to that at this stage. I'll have to take that on notice. Thanks.
Mayor, if I may, there's just that, so taking on board what the Acting General Manager said in relation to the employee costs, we are still looking at an increase over our half-year budget review for 2019-2020 to the 2021 budget of nearly $500,000. So I think this is probably, is this something that could be reasonably reviewed as part of Councillor Churchill's suggestion that this whole thing be reviewed at the August meeting, because hopefully we've got a little bit more of a handle on what our employee costs are going to be come August.
I would assume, to the Acting General Manager, I would assume that if there were redundancies to be paid out, that figure would also include redundancies.
There is a provision in there to allow for redundancies.
Yeah, so therefore it wouldn't be appropriate. No issue with what you said, Councillor Arnold, and I know you weren't delving into that space, but I think a portion of that would most probably be that, I would think. And I think, yeah, I don't think that Acting General Manager would have any issue with bringing something back to the table for Council to review as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you.
And also, I just want to add that the vehicle, the Mayor's vehicle, that has just hit 80,000, and of course that's going to continue on for another year or maybe 2 or 3, because yeah, I think the utes were that old and were to the point of being an OH&S issue. That's what I think, Ms. Waters, you advised in workshops, that there's some that we just have no choice, and it's bad timing. You know what it looks like, it's bad timing, but there is no choice there. Okay, so Councillor Simons.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just through you to Ms. Walters. And just a question really on page 57 with our net profit line on the forecast. Can you just explain that figure? Is that a minus $678,000 profit on the forecast for 2020 in the forecast line there? Does that, it doesn't seem to, and I'm happy to be corrected, but it doesn't seem to add up with our profit and loss sheet on the page 39, where we're showing a profit of around 536,000. I don't know if it's
through you, Mayor. So yes, this is the forecast at for 30 June. Now it does take into account, I'm not sure if you're present, Councillor Simons, at one of the workshops, or there's a number of items, about $430,000 worth of items listed on capital works that are really operational in nature, and will end up, if we spend all that money against those line items, will have to be moved from the capital works budget into as an operating materials and services expense, and some will employee costs as part of that. So a lot of the road repairs that are listed on the 2019-20 budget for capital works are in fact maintenance in nature, so we can't create an asset out of them, and if they will hit. So that has been a big movement, and also the loss of Taswater dividend has been a big movement. They're the two major factors hitting this month.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any further debate? Question, Councillor Breeny?
Thank you, Mayor. Just through you to the Acting General Manager. I note that the motion indicates that we are to review it, or reviewed no later than the ordinary council meeting August 2020. I'm just interested in whether or not there are any statutory or other reasons as to why we can't just make it quarterly, so it'd be September.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. My comment would be ideally after the end of September quarter, which really can't go to October meeting. To do it at August meeting is really only reporting on 1 month's worth of figures. That would be my only comment.
Thank you. That's my concern too, is that it seems to be a short period to be reporting on, and maybe we'd get a better idea of where we stand were we to amend that part of the motion to read September instead of August. But that's just a thought of mine.
Brina, you've muted yourself.
Sorry, I'm not aware of workloads, and I presume that it's something that we need to consider. Thank you.
Councillor Churchill, that's been raised. What do you think? Would you like to amend to September?
Yeah, I'd like to take the acting general manager's advice on that. I mean, if she feels that it is, through you, Mayor, if she feels that it's going to be more practical to do it to the end of September, I'm more than happy for that to go into September.
Yes.
That would be my advice.
Thank you.
So change to September. Councillor Browning, you happy with that? Yes. Any further debate? No. Okay. Councillor Churchill, do you wish to close debate?
No, I think everything's there in front of us. The only thing I did want to point out was that I think that those grants that we've had to been lucky enough to get, or worked hard enough to get, because they still constitute most of the works budgets. And out of rates, there's about 1.2 million by my rough estimate that is actually coming out of rate allocation. So we're very fortunate to be able to still do as much as we are able to do on the back of those grants. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? It is unanimous. Thank you. Item 7.4, budget reallocation capital IT expense. There is a recommendation on page 66. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Simons.
That council reallocate the sum of $44,785 from the ceiling of Saltworks Road, carried forward project to capital IT projects as outlined in this agenda, item 7.4 of the ordinary council meeting held 23rd of June 2020.
Thank you. Somebody to second, please. Councillor Churchill. Councillor Simons, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Only other than it looks like it's a pretty important thing to do. We look like we're a little bit exposed, so I think it definitely needs to be done.
Thank you. Councillor Churchill? No. Does anyone wish to speak against the motion? For the motion? Councillor Arnold?
Again, I'm not really for or against it. I've just got some clarity to seek.
Sure.
I will support the motion, but only on the basis that council needs to protect its IT capacity and security. And I did agree in principle to it before I became aware of the potential for the breach of the Act. However, at the time, I wasn't aware where the money was going to come from. I'm not totally sure of the legality of this, though, because my reticence on the matter is on the basis that I do not believe that council has the legislative power to agree in principle by electronic means in a workshop or anything else, and then have it ratified at a future council meeting. Once the matter's been acted on by the general manager, as the IT situation has been in recent weeks, and I accept that it had to happen, then it's really subjective as to whether council has made a decision outside the bounds of a properly constituted council meeting, either open or closed. And as council is aware, we are in breach of the Act if we make a decision outside of a meeting, or even in fact come to an agreed position, which is effectively what in principle support is. But as I said, I will support the motion because of the importance of protecting our IT. I just question the legality of it.
Okay, so just confirming there that this isn't ratifying a previous, this is a straight, recommendation to do this.
However, there is a paragraph on page 65. Councillors were made aware of this situation in May 2012 and agreed in principle for the work to be undertaken. That's where I'm coming from. But that's okay. I'm fine to, I will acknowledge the meeting. I just want to flag my concern about in principle decisions.
Yeah, I think though in respect to security breaches and so forth, I reckon the GM would be well within her right to just go and do something just about, and in letting council know that they needed to do that because it's putting council at risk.
I won't argue with that at all, Mayor, but it's around the decision of the funding for it. That's what it's around, but that's okay. Thank you.
Okay, so any further debate? No. Okay. Councillor Simons, do you wish to close?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Great. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you. 7.5, draft private works policy. There is a recommendation on page 69. Could I have a motion, please? Motion, please. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. That I'll move that council adopts the draft private works policy as attached to this report effective 23rd of June 2020.
Thank you. Then somebody to second, please. Councillor Arnold. Do you wish to speak to the motion, Councillor Woods?
No, the motion and the report speaks for itself.
Thank you. Councillor Arnold?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against the motion? For the motion? Any further debate? Deputy Mayor, I assume you don't wish to close?
No,
Put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you. Unanimous. Item 7.6, draft risk management strategy policy and draft risk management policy. Before we go into the motion here, I just wish to ask, is there any amendments? Has anyone picked up any amendments? Do I need to go through it page by page? No. Okay, so could I have a motion, please? Councillor Browning?
I move that council adopts the Glamorgan Spring Bay Council Risk Management Strategy and the Glamorgan Spring Bay Council Risk Management Policy as attached to this report effective the 23rd of June 2020.
Thank you. And somebody just second, please. Councillor Robinson, do you wish to speak to the motion, Councillor Browning?
No, it's self-explanatory.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson?
No.
Thank you. Anyone wish to speak against the motion? For the motion? Any further debate? Thank you. Councillor Browning, you don't wish to close? No. Put the motion. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. 7.7, Local Government Association Tasmania Special General Meeting Appointment of Proxy. Could I have a motion, please? There is a recommendation on page 71. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. I'll move that council retrospectively endorses the appointment of Councillor Jeff Lyons, West Tamar Council as Glamorgan Spring Bay Council's proxy to vote on its behalf at the Local Government Association of Tasmania Special General Meeting to be held on the 26th of June 2020, and B, the direction of Councillor Lyon as proxy to vote for the proposed rule change to allow for meetings to be conducted remotely at the Local Government Association of Tasmania Special General Meeting to be held on the 26th of June 2020.
That was a bit of a tongue twister, that one, Deputy Mayor.
Yes, and I need a bit more to drink of tea.
And somebody to second? Councillor Brini, do you wish to speak to the motion, Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. It speaks for itself. Thank you.
Councillor Brini? No. Anyone wish to speak against the motion? For the motion? Any further debate? No. You don't wish to close, Deputy Mayor? No. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. 7.8, renewal of Bicheno Library lease with Department of Education. Recommendation on page 74. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Simons.
I'll put the motion that Council offers the Department of Education, Tasmania, a 3-year lease for the Bicheno Library located at 78 Burgess Street, Bicheno, in accordance with the terms of the existing lease for an annual lease amount of $11,000 per annum plus GST to be reviewed and increased annually in line with the Consumer Price Index, Hobart.
Yes, good, thank you. Could I have somebody to second, please? Councillor Robinson, do you wish to speak to the motion, Councillor Simons?
Other than the library is very well used in Bicheno, and I would hope that the Education Department would take that as it stands.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson?
Yeah, I'd go along with what Councillor Simons is saying there. It's a good facility and well used by the community, and I'm pleased to see that it looks like being maintained.
Does any councillor wish to speak against the motion? For the motion? No further debate. Would the mover wish to close?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Put the motion. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. 7.9, public question time procedure. There is a recommendation on page 75. Motion, please. Councillor Brini.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that Council adopts the revised public question time. How do I ask a question? Procedures as attached to this report, effective 23rd of June 2020.
Thank you. Somebody to second? Deputy Mayor Woods. You wish to speak to the motion, Councillor Brini?
Thank you, Mayor. Just briefly, clarifying a brochure or a document is for the public to be able to understand what rights they have and what their responsibilities are in public question time can only be good. And having this one amended and slightly briefed is really a step forward. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor? No. Anyone wish to speak against the motion? For the motion? Any further? Councillor Arnold?
Mine's not actually for or against again. It's,
Councillor Arnold, I'll just say, Councillor Arnold, I'll go against, for, and then any further debate. Or
okay, thank you. Yeah, appreciate that. I thought there was going to be some direction, for want of a better word, in this public question time. How do I ask a question? That said, that defined that questions can only be addressed to the Mayor in relation to council operations. Individual councillors cannot be questioned on a matter, and yet in the question time earlier today there was a question directed at me. The other thing that I'm questioning now after the public question time earlier today is why is more than one question, more than two questions allowed from a single letter. And if it's one letter, it equals two questions, regardless of how many signatories, in my view. So I'm a little bit concerned that we appear to have gone outside this within 2 hours. So I need that, there needs to be some clarification around it.
Okay, so just before you go on, so there is a limit of 2 questions per person, either in writing or in person.
But
so
if
there wasn't more than that.
But if it's one letter, it is only 2 questions, regardless of how many signatories are on it.
Is that what our current rules say?
Well, if you read this, that's really what it's saying, that it is 2 questions per person. Yeah. But not if it, I don't believe, my interpretation of it is it's not in one, it's not when there's 15 or 16 signatories that there can be then 30 questions, because it's defeating the purpose of the 15 minutes.
Well, no, but this actually says there is a limit of 2 questions per person, either in writing or in person. It doesn't mean that they have to put it in 15 different documents.
Okay, well, that's not how I would interpret it. That this should be from 2 questions from one person, not from 15 signatories to get around this process. But if that's how council wants to deal with it, then that's fine.
Are you proposing the mover to, or an amendment that questions that made clear in here that questions can only be addressed to the mayor? Is that what you'd like added?
I think there needs to be clarity that questions cannot be directed to individual councillors. The public question time is in relation to the operations of council, not the actions of an individual councillor.
Okay, so what words do you have? We need some, if you'd like it to be fixed, then what words would you like to put in?
I don't have any at the moment, Mayor, to be honest. I just think that it needs to be clarity. There needs to be a dot point that says questions of individual councillors will not be permitted, or words to that effect.
Yeah. So, Councillor Brini, as the mover, would you be happy for the acting general manager to include some words to the effect that would of Councillor Arnold, that public question time is not to be directed at the individual council or only to the chairperson or the acting general manager or the general manager, something like that? Are you happy for that to be included as a dot point?
I'm not sure whether I can agree to that until I find out whether or not the rules, as governed by Regulation 31 of the Local Government Act, which relate directly to public question time, whether or not the rules allow that. I don't want to contravene Regulation 31 if Regulation 31 doesn't allow what Councillor Arnold was asking, but if it does, then it definitely should go in there. It should be part of our how do I ask a question information.
Councillor Arnold?
I think if councillors might recall that in the workshop when this was discussed, we actually discussed this being put into this document because of the questions that have been asked in the past of both the Deputy Mayor and me. So that's why we said that it needs to be very clear that public question time is about the overall operations of council, not about the actions of individual councillors.
Okay, so rather than if there needs to be a change to this, I think, this is what we got 4 or 5 days ago, whatever it was when we got the agenda last Thursday. So maybe you'd like to have a think about it, Councillor Arnold, and bring it back to the next council meeting, or the acting general manager will put it back on next council meeting with an additional dot point. I think this is an important document personally to go through today, though, because after whatever it was, a 40-minute opening to the meeting, I think the 2 questions really does need to come into play now, and seriously come into play. So I think it'd be good to get this through, but if maybe you can think about what words you'd like and check the Act or work with the Acting General Manager between now and the next meeting.
I'm happy to do that.
Sure. Okay, thank you. So Councillor Simons was next.
No, my questions have been answered. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Woods was next.
Thank you, Mayor. I concur with what Councillor Arnold has, and I do recall somewhere, what I don't know whether it's in the meeting procedures or in the Act somewhere, that the questions of individual councillors cannot be asked. I'm happy to be corrected on that one. However, I think it'd be prudent to probably defer this matter until the next council meeting to get the clarification that's needed with regards to the questions that have just been posed.
Well, you need to put a foreshadow motion if that's what you wish to do.
I can't because I'm the seconder.
No, you're not. Oh, yes, you are. Sorry.
Mayor, if I may, Mayor, I'm happy for this to go through today if it can be reviewed in the context of my question.
Yeah.
At a meeting, in whether that's in July or August or September or whenever. As long as that my question can be reviewed, I'm happy for this to go through today.
You can, obviously you know that you can put a motion on notice, you know that, at the next meeting, you know what I mean? So you can do it yourself or work with Acting General Manager to put that next meeting. It won't be a problem at all.
No,
but I do agree with Councillor Brennan, it'd probably be good to get the words right in accordance with the Act. Acting General Manager?
I was just going to comment in relation to dot point 7, gives the chair the option to pull something up that is not related to council business. That may address many of those personal questions, but may not cover all circumstances.
I think Councillor Arnold wants to be very specific, and I understand her reason for that. And I think some words, some very specific words, could come back to the next meeting or something and deal with the concerns. Councillor Arnold?
And if I may, Mayor, you're not always aware of what the questions are going to be.
Absolutely not.
You know that Mr. Smith wants to ask a question or Mrs. Brown wants to ask a question, but you don't know what the question is.
No.
So how can you reasonably refuse the question?
Yeah, I can only do it after the
You
event.
only refuse the question after it's been asked, and it's too late then.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, Councillor Brenny, are you right?
Yes, thank you.
Good. This has been a complex one. Any further debate? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Councillor Browning? Unanimous, thank you. Item 7.10, progress on Visitor Information Centre transition. And there is a recommendation on page 78. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Brenny?
Thank you, Mayor. I move that agenda item 7.10 on the progress of Visitor Information Centre transition report is received and noted.
Thank you. Somebody to second, please. Councillor Robinson, do you wish to speak to your motion, Councillor Brenny?
Just briefly, thank you, Mayor. We need to make sure that the progress, all progress that is carried out in relation to this matter be available for people to ensure that they know exactly what's going on and they can assess for themselves what the impacts will be. Not being able to keep up with progress on these sort of things can breed all sorts of scuttlebutt and information that's not correct. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Robertson, do you wish to speak?
Yes, I'd agree with that, and I think we will all have that expectation that the Acting General Manager keeps up the progress with the various stakeholders, and I think this first report's been really good. and hopefully that progress will continue.
Good. Anyone wish to speak against the motion? For the motion? Any other debate? I'll put the motion. All those, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. If I may, a question through you to the Acting General Manager on page 77 in the second paragraph. It says on the morning of 27th of May, a lengthy discussion was held between the Visitor Information Manager and Council's Human Resources advised before the Visitor Information staff were advised. How were they advised of the decision? They were advised of the decision there. So how were they, the staff in particular, advised of the decision of council?
Just before you answer that, Acting General Manager, just being aware of that, I'm sure Deputy Mayor Woods is just asking a simple question here, and a very simple question, and not, just being aware not to step into operational matters. But I think the question is valid, but you know what I mean? Just being careful in the answer.
Yep.
The staff were advised via email initially and then phoned individually. It was a very challenging situation given the location of all our staff, some at work, some at home, some on leave, not all having the capacity to jump online or be in person, and all hearing it, hopefully not always successfully, at the same time before hearing it from other stakeholders or members of the public and the like. I understand it's a very challenging and stressful time for the staff. And one of those things that I don't think it would, there is a right way that will deliver an optimum outcome. It's a very difficult situation for us to handle.
Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you. No further debate. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Someone dropped out. Councillor Browning has dropped out. If we could just wait. I'll just ring Councillor Browning. She's not in the waiting room.
Can't see her, Mayor.
Oh, hello. Okay, I'm going to put you on speaker phone. Okay. Can you hear?
Yep.
Okay, so you just need to tell me if you wish to speak. So we're putting the motion as put. All those in favour?
Yep.
Thank you. Unanimous. So just noting at 4:33 p.m. 4:37 p.m. Councillor Browning come in on telephone.
Yeah, the clock's wrong.
What is it? 4:31?
Yeah, 4:31.
Thank you. And that was at the completion of item 7.1. 7.11 Bicheno Boat Ramp Jetties Extension. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Simons?
I'd like to move the motion that Council A approve in principle the request by Marine and Safety Tasmania for these works to proceed, and B, agrees to lodge and cover the costs of the planning application to extend the jetties.
Thank you. Somebody in a second? Deputy Mayor Woods, would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor Simons?
Yeah, look, I'd just like to say it's a much needed improvement on the ramp at Bicheno, and the community's been lobbying for these improvements for a number of years. I think initially the cost to council is low. Obviously, MAST are paying for the works, and I guess council takes over the asset as such. But the economic benefits of these improved facilities far outweigh the minor maintenance costs that we'll have as a council, I believe. And I think we just need to support these types of developments. Otherwise, we risk our facilities being run down and not fit for purpose.
Deputy Mayor Woods, do you wish to speak?
Only to concur with Councillor Simons, and in regards to the safety of all users, I think it's a good idea to do so. And with regards also to the fact there's limited parking, so it's good to have a place where an extension on the jetty where they can tie their boats up while they go and park their vehicles. I think I will be supporting this today.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against the motion? Councillor Breeny.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'd like you to mark the time, please, to ensure I don't go over 5 minutes. Thank you. I'd like to read my comments. As long as MAST continues to evade their responsibilities to the Tasmanian boating community and continues to force councils to pay the real cost of the boating infrastructure they are supposed to provide, I will not support any attempts by MAST to abrogate their responsibilities and force this council to spend precious ratepayer funds to prop up their continued failure to honestly and faithfully represent boat licence holders. This application has all the hallmarks of the business as usual MAST project. This is arising from an application from the public, according to MAST, by way of a recreational boating fund application. The application and funding has nothing to do with council, and it is a state government issue. MAST like to couch these presentations as being from the public. When they tell us it is a request from the public, what they should tell us is, if they were being transparent, is that it is a request by boat ramp users, presumably those who are licensed boat owners and users, and it is not a request from the general rate-paying public. What MAST consistently avoid is making it clear to councils that they represent the boat licence holders. They do not represent the vast majority of ratepayers. MAST has already approved the $110,000, presumably raised from boat licence revenue. MAST obviously deem the extension and upgrade as being necessary, and it is a worthy project, obviously. Then comes the sidestepping. After accepting boat licence fees that are presumably paid for provision of better boating safety provisions, and after receiving and approving a request for funding for a project that provides better boating services, they then ask if council is happy for these works to proceed. What council would not be happy for MAST to provide infrastructure for safer boating? After all, that is what Marine and Safety Tasmania is supposed to provide. But then comes the part where MAST dumps their responsibilities on local councils. In this application, as with other boating infrastructure projects this council has overseen, MAST requests that council waives the planning fees, not a totally onerous impost, but not a mandatory requirement of council. But the real impost, the real dump on council is that, one, MAST require council to lodge the development application, and MAST wants ratepayers to pay the never-ending and expensive, although others may think inexpensive, the expensive maintenance costs of ramps like this, jetties, walkways, infrastructure costs of providing access roads, car and trailer parking, waste services, signage, and all associated costs with service provision of ramps and jetties, etc. The requests for council to lodge the DA is a standard ploy to further entrench the responsibility for ongoing asset maintenance costs with council. But it is MAST's failure to accept full responsibility for the never-ending maintenance costs that is the major issue. In the instance of this jetty, for public liability safety reasons, council is responsible for regular maintenance checks and subsequent repairs to be undertaken by very expensive specialty divers. That's already happened. These costs have been extensive, so much so that in some cases, and in this case, I'm pretty sure I'm aware in my memory, council has had to go cap in hand and press mast to help them with the cost. A bill that should be met by the state government body responsible for safe boating, by the state government body responsible for licensing of boat owners, and by the state government body responsible for servicing and boating the boating community, by mast, not by ratepayers.
1 minute, Councillor Brini. Sorry, sorry, I've got about 40 seconds, so you're right. Keep going.
It'll be 40 seconds. I will support any motion that seeks to provide added safety features and improved services for boating facilities in this municipality. But I will vigorously oppose any motion that divests mast of its mandatory responsibilities and instead forces council ratepayers to fund its shortcomings. Without a firm undertaking from mast to fully fund all ongoing costs associated with this proposal, I cannot support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. 4 minutes, 52 seconds. Okay, thank you. That was against. For the motion? Against the motion? Councillor Churchill?
Yes, Mayor, I'd just like to say some things against the motion, but could I just ask Councillor Simons through you what he meant by an economic improvement as a result of doing these alterations?
Through you, the Mayor, just briefly, Councillor Churchill, we have a lot of boat users in the area that come and use the boat ramp. They purchase their fuel from the service station. They stay overnight in town. So there's an economic benefit that comes with having good facilities at the boat ramp. It's an attractor, an economic attractor.
Okay, so, and the facility isn't up to scratch at the moment, I assume is what you're saying?
The facility is not quite fit for purpose at the moment with the number of boats that use it. Yeah, it causes problems throughout the summer with ramping of boats, and it just gets pretty hectic around the jetty. So this is a good proposal as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, yeah, well, I guess really I just wanted to speak largely in support of what Councillor Brini has said. The really critical part of this is the fact that the mast is the one who collects, or the body who collects the fees for boat licences, and rightly should construct the jetties as they do and as they have, but the ongoing costs should also come out of that same funding, in my belief. And it's starting to get a little bit repetitious around here. We've seen problems occurring with our jetties here in Wisconsin, and it seems that councils are being left to correct issues where these boat ramps aren't perhaps performing as well as they should. And I think it is time for state government to take control of this in every sense, take full financial responsibility for it. And I do respect the fact that they're great facilities for the local community. No doubt about that. Thank you.
Your sound's getting pretty bad there, Councillor Churchill. I don't know. You just need to keep really still because you're breaking up a bit, but we basically got what you wish to say. Councillor Robinson.
You're on mute, Councillor Robinson.
Look, I've just got a couple of points to make, not necessarily speaking for or against at this point. The existing jetties and boat ramps at Bicheno are already owned and maintained by a council at the moment. And if this project goes ahead, I guess they're going to be made a bit safer, and perhaps in the in the short to medium term, maybe a little bit less maintenance. And whilst agreeing with what Councillor Brini and Councillor Churchill are saying about the, Marsh should take some responsibility, I think the fact that the council actually owns this jetty and boat ramp at the moment, and a project like this will hopefully make it a bit safer, I'll certainly be voting in favour of this motion.
Okay, any further debate? Councillor Arnold?
Thank you. I'm going to support the motion too, only because our strategic plan requires us to develop high quality, cost effective infrastructure and services that meets the need of our communities, residents and visitors. And I think this this particular project will achieve that. Thank you.
Thank you. No further debate. Okay, I'm going to, I'll be voting against this. It says here the primary purpose for the extension is to increase the boat holding capacity. I see nothing there that really encourages me to, that it's okay to spend this amount of money, and whilst it's not coming out of council funds, because council have no arrangement with MAST to replace these assets, then we have to replace them in. We need to factor those into our asset management. So we need to depreciate, we need to gather funds from ratepayers year on year, whilst ever they exist, to cover the depreciation costs. So it's not just about the maintenance, it's about the depreciation cost and the current arrangements that are in place where MAST hands the asset over to council. It hands the asset over, it hands the maintenance over, and it hands over also the depreciation costs involved with that. And those depreciation costs are paid by ratepayers. I think also in respect to the motion that we passed earlier, I think this one fits in perfectly with that. I think we need to ensure that that the assets we have at the moment, we need to make sure we can maintain what we have at the moment appropriately, and until we get our asset management plans in place and receive a report in respect to that, yeah, I don't agree with taking on a further $110,000. Sorry, did I break up then? Taking on a further $110,000 impact on our depreciation schedule. So yeah, so I won't be supporting it. So now, Councillor Simons, do you wish to close debate?
Thank you, Mayor. I would. There's just a couple of things I'd like to counter there. Firstly, I don't quite agree with the fact that we'll be replacing the jetty at the end of the life, because in actual fact, it's MAST that replaces the infrastructure at the end of its life. I understand it will be depreciated over a period of time on our books.
Point of order, Councillor Simons. Councillor Simons, point of order. We don't know that. Okay, so that's not providing accurate information. We do not know that. We do not have that in writing.
Thank you, Mayor, but I'll just point to the fact that they're prepared to build onto the jetty that is already existingly there. I understand Councillor Bruni and Councillor Churchill's concerns. I just would say about that, that's a conversation for another day, and probably a conversation that needs to be taken up at a higher level, perhaps through the GAT, as a group of councils that are on the coast. That is nothing wrong with having that conversation. Keeping in mind that we do receive the benefits of the safety upgrades, and we do receive those economic benefits that come with having good facilities. And it's a partnership as far as I see between council and MAST. I mean, it is our asset. They're providing the funding to do it. I would just note that marine infrastructure makes up 2% of our asset class. So it's not a huge amount of maintenance and depreciation as far as I understand that we have to cover. I think the benefits far outweigh the costs we have there. So that's all. Thank you.
Sorry, where did you get the 2% of the asset class from?
It's off our asset management. I'm not sure where I printed it from, actually. It must be on the website, I think. It's that document.
Okay.
That would be old asset
adopted in 2014 and review date was 2018. So I don't suspect it is slightly out of date, I imagine, but I don't suspect it's changed a lot.
Well, that's why we're having our asset management plans done, because we don't know. The assets haven't been, correct me if I'm wrong, Acting General Manager, the assets haven't been assessed for don't know how long, and they all need to be assessed as to the true depreciation costs.
That's correct, as part of developing the long-term asset management plan and getting condition assessments on a lot of the categories. Just for noting, boat ramps and jetties are not included in marine infrastructure. They're including with our buildings and other recreational facilities. That's mainly the marina and wharf. And at the time, the marina might not have been finished the time that document was completed. So yeah, the relevance at the current point in time of those figures, I couldn't vouch for.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour? Councillor Simons, Woods and Arnold. Against? Councillor Wisby, Churchill, Breeny. Browning. Councillor Robinson, what were you voting?
I had my hand up for 4.
All right, your hand didn't go up. You must have frozen at that point. So if we can just clarify that, that would be 4 was Councillor Robinson, Arnold, Simons and Woods, and against was Councillor Breeny, Wisby, I was going to say Browning, but that's not right. Breeny, Wisby, Churchill and Browning. Motion is lost. So, Acting General Manager, it's lost on a 4-4, and therefore I assume that if it does not approve, then it does, sorry, if the vote was we do not approve in principle, then we do not approve.
Could be stand corrected by other more experienced councillors, but I would see that as a reasonable interpretation.
Councillor Arnold, do you have a thought on that?
Other than it might, well, no, only I'm thinking along the lines of planning decisions when they go 4-4. Council still has to make a decision.
Yeah, well, I think we've made the decision not to endorse. Like, that is the decision here. We've said we're not going to endorse it. So, oh, Councillor Browning, she's back. We're not going to endorse it. So therefore, if the Acting General Manager isn't going to act on the request, therefore it's a no. I would take it as that. Just wanted to clarify. Is that how you would take it? Yeah.
That's how I would interpret it.
Yeah.
It's not perfectly clear.
Okay, we'll move forward. Item 7.12, Swansea Community Hub. There is a officer's recommendation on page 83. Could I have a motion, please? Motion, please. Councillor Browning. Off.
It must be Swansea that's not working at the moment. I move that Council, 1, investigate community interest in establishing a community hub in Swansea to include the PCYC and community room, a community room, the community shed, a reuse shed and a reuse shop. And 2, authorise Mayor Wisby, Councillor Browning, Breeny and Churchill to undertake preliminary tasks of consultation with interested persons in the community. And 3, that Mayor Wisby, Councillor Browning, Breeny and Churchill report back through the General Manager at the August 2020 Ordinary Council meeting to enable Council to determine how to proceed with the project and its ongoing management.
Thank you. Somebody to second, please. Councillor Breeny, do you wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Browning?
Through the Mayor, the building is fit for purpose now, and we need to start to have a community gathering to proceed with, progress this along. I think now you can have a meeting outside with 50 people, so hopefully we will be able to start to move forward and get the community involved and start to get the doors open.
Good, thank you, Councillor. Is that all? Sorry, Councillor Browning, did I cut you off?
No, you did not.
Thank you. Councillor Breeny?
I agree with what Councillor Browning has said. There is a group of dedicated people champing at the bit to get going, and as long as we do it right and we do it in accordance with local government requirements, I think this can be a terrific community asset. Thank you.
Anyone wish to speak against the motion? Councillor Arnold?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I will speak against the motion because the risk consideration states by not investigating community interests, we risk being exposed to bad publicity and loss in public confidence. It's all a little bit late now, isn't it? Because we've just spent $162,000 on this building and many, many, many volunteer hours to get it to the point it's at. So my view is it's too late to establish a committee to go and find out whether the community actually wants it and whether the community actually supports it. Why aren't we just establishing a Section 24 committee to actually undertake what's been suggested? What happens if the community says, hey, we don't want this? This is not what we wanted. So I can't support the motion as it is.
Councillor Arnold, I don't think that's the intent of the recommendation. General Manager, to you.
My understanding of the discussions we've had with the councillors involved so far, it's really at a stage of trying to engage the community in a fair and open way as to who's going to be involved in the running of it. At the moment, you know, there's been certain volunteers and certain members of the community that are strongly passionate about getting this up and running. I think it's now time to make sure we open that up to everyone in the community. And I imagine that there will be a Section 24 for at least a short period of time, you know, if they wish to then have a separate organisation running this, but there'll probably be just a few steps along the way.
Thank you. Councillor Arnold?
Well, I can't argue with what the Acting General Manager just said. However, the motion says investigate community interest in establishing a community hub. Haven't we already done that by the expenditure of $162,000 on a building? So, and my question remains, what happens if in this broader consultation, the community says, we don't want it?
So you're proposing an amendment, Councillor Arnold?
No, not at all. No.
Okay, thank you. Anyone wish to speak for the motion? Against the motion? Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. I was sort of confused reading this one because, as Councillor Arnold has already pointed out, the building's ready to go and we're doing the community consultation. It seems to be that we're doing the community consultation after the fact. So I would suggest maybe that there could be an amendment to the motion to say that council forms a Section 24 committee of council consisting of whoever, and just go with it because it's already been done. So why are we consulting now? That is just my question. I just don't understand it.
Okay, so I think the officers, well, not the officer's fault. Sorry, the recommendation could be worded so that it is. So sorry, myself, Councillor Browning, Breeny, Churchill, the buildings manager, the acting general manager. We've had several meetings in respect to progressing this matter. So in respect to the community room, it was about what users are there. Is there a knitting group? Is there a crocheting group? Is there a, suicide prevention group? It was about looking at the users of the facility, not the fact of building the facility. We've got the facility. It was talking with people who are interested in coming forward and putting forward what they would like to see it used for, i.e. 2 days a week as a men's shed, a couple of days a week as a ladies' shed, whatever. But there's various rooms in there and there's various options on how they're managed initially and ongoing. So I think that was the purpose of the report. That's what was discussed in the few meetings that we've had in the last month or so, that all councillors were invited to attend. So, possibly Councillor Browning, you may wish to reword, slightly amend the motion, because what we're looking at here is it's basically for the future use and management options for the facility. That's what, Councillor Brenny, I'll come to you in a moment.
I thought I could save you some time, Mayor.
So that could be what, that could be what you're considering. Councillor Brenny?
Thank you, Mayor. My suggestion is this, as seconder, I may suggest, if I could, for Councillor Browning to amend statement 1 to read, investigates community interest in management of a community hub in Swansea, because that's what we're looking for. We're not looking for interest. We've got interest. What we're looking for is how to move forward with interested people in the community. And I think it's the management we're looking at, not the establishing. Thank you.
Well, what I said there was for the future use options and management, because it's about all those different people that have shown an interest and want to know how can they all mesh together and make this work. So it's actually for the future use options and management. Future use and management options sort of thing. I think it's actually both, because it's about getting those people together, and that's been impossible to do so because of the COVID situation. Councillor Browning?
Yeah, COVID-19 has had a very dramatic impact on how this community hub has moved forward, really. So, I mean, the building's there, but the community haven't had a chance to even think about whether they want the name, the community hub, which I think is another thing that, this getting the community involved will give them some ownership about what the name is and how the future use is going to be. So I'm more than happy to change it to investigate communities' future use and management options in establishing a community hub in Swansea. Is that?
Yeah, so it's basically investigate community interest in the future uses and management options.
In the future use
and management options.
Management options, yeah.
For the community hub in Swansea, and everything else runs. I think every other part of it makes sense.
Yeah. It's about, because a lot of the people that have been helping with the volunteering, mostly through to Councillor Breeny, men's shed, like community shed users that we haven't yet, I mean, there are people out there that want to get involved in the reuse shop, which they haven't done as yet because of COVID-19 and, lack of conversation. So now it's about having that conversation.
Yep. Okay, we need to move on. Anyone wish to... Oh, sorry. So you got those changes? Thank you. So basically, to investigate community interest in the management options for the community hub in Swansea, the PCYC, a community room, the community shed, the reuse shed, and the reuse shop, and points 2 and 3.
Was future use in there? Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I couldn't hear.
Yeah. Councillor Browning, Browning, you're okay with that. Councillor Brini, you're okay with that? Good. Anyone wish to speak for or against the motion? No further debate. I'm going, oh, you don't wish to close, Councillor Browning?
No, no, I think,
You've just muted yourself.
I think I've said everything that I wanted to
Thank
say. Thank you.
I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Mayor Wisby, Robinson, Churchill, Brini, Browning. Against? Councillor Arnold, Simons and Woods. The motion's carried. Okay, Bicheno Skateboard Park. There is a recommendation on page 86. Councillor Churchill.
Yes, I would like to move that Council lays the project on the table for reconsideration pending the completion of the Glamorgan Spring Bay Council long-term financial plan and the long-term asset management plan.
Thank you. Somebody to second, please. Councillor Robinson. Do you wish to speak to the motion, Councillor Churchill?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I do. Firstly, I want to make it clear that I'd like to be able to commit council to the development and construction of the skateboard park in Bicheno. I recognise that the children and community have worked hard to raise funds which are further supported by community groups and Bendigo Bank. Council is currently developing key documents required under legislation, including an asset management plan and a new long-term financial plan. I refer you to item 7.1 in the current agenda. Until this work is completed, Council would be financially irresponsible to commit to the funding or receipt of new assets to be serviced, repaired and maintained into the future. Council is required under legislation to make provision for the depreciation of its assets over the life of those assets. As stated in the motion, if it's upheld, the project would remain on the table, and I would expect that over the coming months further discussion will be had and possible alternate solutions could be considered. But at this point in time, we need to be consistent with our financial situation. And I think there's, this has got to be strongly considered, and obviously I support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson? Off.
Yeah, look, I concur with what Councillor Churchill's saying. Whilst I think it's a fantastic project, and under normal financial circumstances, I'd certainly probably look at supporting it. But I think until we get that asset management and risk management information to us in the short to medium term, I think it's a judicial and smart move just to delay it.
Thank you. Anyone wish to speak against the motion? Councillor Simons?
Yeah, I'd like to speak against the motion. I think this is one of those community-led projects that's been on the books now for the last 20 years. And as far as I totally understand Councillor Churchill and Councillor Robinson's concern about the financials, but what the BCDA and the community is asking for here is consent for council to support the project. They're looking at just getting funding for stage one, which is concrete. And the acting general manager may best be able to tell me what the depreciation time frame is on concrete. So I suspect the initial maintenance costs that we're trying to talk about here, taking something over, is actually quite low. I think the BCDA has done a great job in bringing this to council with a concept plan, with community approval, all the things that should make our job quite easy. And I think by giving it support, we're not exposing ourselves to anything at the moment. All BCDA and the community want to be able to do is to go and see if they can get funding for this project. And for us to put it on the table will mean they'll miss the grants round that they're trying to get a hold of to actually see whether or not this project can go any further. They're not asking us for any money whatsoever. They're quite happy to fund this whole project through external sources. I just feel it'd be a terrible injustice to this group. They've worked hard to get it to where it is. They've already had an approval that was rescinded. The disappointment from that in the community was palpable. I just hope Council doesn't support the motion that's on the table. Thank you.
Just want to clarify, Councillor Simon, so are the BCDA prepared to take on the maintenance and depreciation costs?
I think there'll be some maintenance and depreciation costs that will come with this project. Stage 1 is concrete, so perhaps I could ask the Acting General Manager to tell us what the depreciation period would be. I assume it would fall into footpaths, perhaps, concrete footpaths or concrete roadways. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I assume it's a long period of time. So I think the depreciation costs aren't a lot. I noticed the letter that the BCDA did send to all councillors did mention in there that they would be coming to discussions about the maintenance, the ongoing maintenance of the asset. I just don't see a lot of maintenance on a concrete skate ramp.
Okay, Councillor Simon. So, Mrs. Walters, my understanding is depreciation on something like that's around 2%. Per annum.
Yeah, through you, Mayor, like a lot of those structures, and a lot of our building structures are around the 2%. It would depend on the design of it from an engineering perspective. Most concrete structures are sort of either at 50 years or even 100 years, but it would depend on the design and the construction of that. So that would need to be assessed as part of the project, the final impact in that. There's obviously also insurance and risk management, cleaning and all that will go with it as well.
Thank you. Anyone wish to speak? Councillor Simons, yes?
I'll just come back to the point of cleaning. At this stage, the BCDA is asking us to consider stage 1, which is the concrete ramp. I don't think there's any cleaning involved with that.
Councillor Arnold?
Thank you. I'm speaking against the motion. There is a concrete skate bowl at Tribunna, which has been there longer than 15 years, I would think. I doubt there's been a huge amount of money spent on that, not even cleaning. It really is past, and that's just concrete. There's nothing else there. It really is past time that Glamorgan Springbank Council supported the Bicheno community on this matter. It's been going on since about 1999. And I'd hazard a guess that some of the parents that are actually supporting their children now are this very same young people who addressed this council in the Bicheno Hall all those years ago. The BCDA is not asking for the whole proposal. All they want is consent for approval for stage 1. As outlined, so the whole proposal is outlined on page 85, and this is just so they can lodge some grant funding applications. Councillor Churchill spoke about our future, and we need to be consistent. We've talked about our core purpose. We've talked about being consistent with our strategic plan. So in number 4, I can't remember the page it's on, but number 4 in our strategic plan, no, sorry, page 9 of our strategic plan deals with our core purpose. And number 4 in that states, planning and creating recreational spaces and facilities, making it easier for us to live active, healthy lives, both physically and mentally. Now, given that the BCDA are not seeking any money from council, only the support of council to lodge a grant application, then surely this is a perfect opportunity to support that part of our core purpose for the young people of Bishonoy.
Anyone wish to speak for the motion? Against the motion? Deputy Mayor?
I concur with both what Councillor Simons and Councillor Arnold have said so far, and I take on board the comments of both the mover.
Deputy Mayor, you're coming through really quiet all of a sudden.
Oh, because is that better?
No, not really.
Oh, you're loud. I'll get closer to the microphone. Because I've had to put the power in, everything goes crackly. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay.
No, you've just muted yourself.
You've just...
Yep, right. Is that better?
Yes, thanks.
Okay, thank you. What I was going to say is that I concur completely with what Councillor Arnold and Councillor Simons have said, and I take on board the comments of the mover and Councillor Churchill and the second of Councillor Robinson. This, the BCDA have been, as has been pointed out already, they've been working tirelessly on this for so many years, and all they are asking for is consent to lodge. It says here, the application requires consent to lodge from Council, from Crown Land Services and from the Department of State Growth. To lodge from any of these parties does not mean that the application is approved. I think it would be prudent in this time that we are supportive of our communities in such a way that it's just to support them with their request to consent to lodge, and and move on with the next stages of what will come with this particular project. Thank you.
Councillor Browning?
Through the Mayor, I'd just like to ask the Acting General Manager, consent to lodge, does that mean that if they get the funding, that then it will end up being our responsibility as council?
Through you, Mayor, like we'll submit for a grant application as part of it, and they're submitting a development application. If the development application gets through the planning authority, then there will not be another stage normally where that would come back to the table. The project would then have the authority to go ahead, unless you add any other conditions.
Thank you.
Councillor Greenie?
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to the Acting General Manager. If a development application does come to Council, will it be discretionary?
Through you, Mayor, I believe there's a comment, and this has come from the planner, that part of it says the zone is open space, the use class is passive recreation, which is a no permit required use in the zone. And then it's got the development will be discretionary and will need to be advertised. I'm not sure if the Executive Manager of Development has had time to get familiar with this proposal and can comment any further. And it may be that part of it does and part of it doesn't. Might be where she is. Robin still there, Dion? The planner?
Just give me a second, but from reading the second paragraph, Marissa, it says that it will be discretionary under the clause, whatever, landscaping. But just give me a second. I'll just call Robin in, okay? Just give me a second.
But Mrs. Walters, correct me if I'm wrong. Councillor Simons, can you just lower your hand for a sec while we sort this out, please? Mrs. Walters, correct me if I'm wrong, but discretionary will only be discretionary if there is an objection or representation during the advertising period. If there is nothing put in respect, no representations are put forward, then often it becomes
Deemed
approved.
Ms. Robin.
The application will be discretionary because it doesn't meet some of those acceptable solutions. So it might not end up going back to council, because if it didn't receive a representation when it was advertised, it wouldn't necessarily go back to council. The ones that we send to council or the planning authority are the ones that receive a representation. But I would suggest that in this case, even if it didn't receive a representation, I would send it to the planning authority anyway, just because of what it is.
Thank you for that answer. It was of concern to me that this proposal would not come back to council, because at this stage, the only reason that I could oppose this motion and allow them to submit the development application was on the understanding that if in the meantime the BCDA hadn't arranged for license control of the area, in other words, their full responsibility for ongoing maintenance, etc., and liability, public liability, so that like any other license or lease on the foreshore, businesses that are responsible for their own maintenance, etc., they would then not be able to come back to council and have council imposed with maintenance costs or liabilities, remembering that this is a skate park and it's injury prone, and council may well be subject to some issues. But given that that's just an assumption, my concern is that we are at the moment being austere about what's happening. I've spoken with the parents and children who are very interested in this in Bicheno. I had a meeting with them, and I reiterated council's situation where the financial constraints really do limit the options that they have. And I made it clear to them that if they came to us with a proposal where they were able to take over the maintenance and control and liability of this facility, then I would be in a position to fully support them, which I do. But having council having to, when you take over something like this by statutory law, I believe, once this is built and it's on a council lease, we are by statutory law required to maintain it and to spend money on it and look after it, liable for accidents, etc. I would suggest that at the moment I would really like to see the BCDA go back to the Crown and maybe consult with council, find out whether or not it's possible for council to peel off a section of land that covers this area from our lease and provide it to the BCDA through the Crown for their control and their maintenance and care and whatever. And after that, bring the DA to us and I'd be happy to support it. Thank you.
Okay, so Councillor Simons, do you have a clarification? Because I think you've had a couple of goes at speaking. So do you have something you need to clarify?
A couple of things from that. Firstly, as far as the discretionary application goes, I think the BCDA would be very happy for it to go out and be advertised to see. They've done their own research as to who may or may not wish to see it there. I think they'd be very glad to see a formal process undertaken by council through the planning division as far as that goes. I'd just like to perhaps ask Councillor Breeny about the idea that this sort of proposal would be under the auspice of a community group. I don't understand that. I think there's a lot of infrastructure and facility in our municipality that wouldn't be acceptable to do. As the council, I think we show a leadership role with these facilities and these recreational spaces, and they are for us to look after.
Okay, so we just need to move on now. I think it's, you know, okay, so that everyone's had an opportunity to have a talk. Okay, so to me, this is not just consent to lodge. It will be consent to lodge potentially if the money comes through and the DA gets approved, it's consent to construct, it's ongoing liability to ratepayers. I'm really supportive of the community, but I'm also supportive of the fact that every additional thing we build will come at a cost to ratepayers, an additional cost. The only way we can pay for it is increase rates or stop doing what we're doing in some way. And I'm not supportive of increasing people's rates to cover the cost for these sorts of facilities at this point. We don't know what our depreciation costs are going to be. Our depreciation costs are covered by ratepayers. So until we know that, I'm not prepared to put my hand up and increase ratepayer cost. It's not the time to do that at the moment. So I won't be supporting it. I will support it coming back to the table. I will support it coming back to the table as per the earlier motion, when council has all its documentation in place and knows its true position, then I would support re-looking at it, but not until then. Okay, Councillor Churchill, do you wish to close debate?
No, thank you, Mayor. I think you've pretty much put it in a nutshell in your statement just then. I think we've got to handle this the right way, and unless, as Councillor Breeny's pointed out, it can be separated off, and I understand that the BCDA is an entity in its own right anyway, that if they could take legal control of it and be responsible for ongoing future costs, maintenance, everything else, including depreciation and entirely no cost to council. I think that is a way forward. I stick with my motion. I still support my motion as I've put it, but I do believe the lines of communication should be kept open, and that the community should feel that that we are listening on this issue. But we have to also look after our broader community financially. And that we were told as new councillors that the decisions that we make are not necessarily for the 4 years we're there. We have to look at what we leave behind in the future, and the responsibilities that are passed on to councils that are going to come after us. And let's be very honest about this. We've been subjected to things that might have been able to be handled.
Point of order, Mayor. I think Councillor Churchill is going way off base here, referring to other things. Please stick to the motion.
Well, that's my call. So, Councillor Churchill, sorry, I don't know what you're going to say because you didn't say it, but yeah, just in closing though, just to say, in closing, you can't bring anything new in.
Okay. That's fine. Look, I've basically said all I need to say. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank
you.
Okay, I'm going to put the motion, which is, just to confirm, because we've been talking about this for a long time, laser project on the table for reconsideration pending the completion of the Glamorgan Spring Bay long-term financial plan and the long-term asset management plan. All those in favour? Councillor Browning, Breeny, Churchill, Robertson, Wisby. Against? Deputy Mayor Woods, Councillor Simons and Arnold. The motion's carried. Item 8, notices of motion, nil. Item 9, petitions, nil. Item 10, questions without notice. For the record, Acting General Manager, if we could do I read the question, you read the response. I think that'll be good for people listening who will listen when this is put up. So these are questions without notice, responses to question taken on notice at the ordinary meeting of council held on the 26th of May 2020. Deputy Mayor Woods, Deputy Mayor Jenny Woods asked, did the Mayor write to Dr. Naidoo thanking him for his 30 years service?
Yes, the Mayor wrote to Dr. Naidoo on 30th of April 2020, extending Council's appreciation for his 30 years service to the Tribunna community.
Oh. Cancellation fees relating to locums not being needed anymore.
Due to the commercial and confidence nature of this question and response, we provided under separate cover to Deputy Mayor Jenny Woods with a copy of that response provided to all councillors.
Thank you. And has the above mentioned doctor indicated that he will join East Coast now that he hasn't taken the mentioned leave?
Due to the confidential nature of any discussions between Council and Dr Nadeau, a response will be provided under separate cover to Deputy Mayor Jenny Woods and a copy of the response provided to all councillors.
Thank you. Are there any questions without notice? Councillor Arnold?
Sorry, just realised I was on mute. Yes, I have questions on two different subjects. I have three questions in relation to the first subject. I'm happy for all the questions to be taken on notice by you or the Acting General Manager. So the first questions I want to ask is in my role as Chair of the NRM Committee. The first question is, why isn't the NRM Committee's submission to the Pipwe's position paper on rural water use strategy on this agenda for consideration by the Council? Number two is, when will this Council start to trust the NRM Committee, its members and staff's expertise on these matters when those matters relate directly to number 8 in our core purpose as stated in the strategic plan, that is protecting environmental values and amenity of the East Coast? And number 3 is, does this Council have the expertise to rewrite the submission once it is workshopped if they don't agree with the content of the draft submission? Because I understand that the submission has to come to a workshop. You know, as I said, I'm happy for those questions to be taken on notice.
They will be taken on notice. Thank you. Any further?
Yes, my second subject is the Buckland Walk. And I'm noting that I did ask the Acting General Manager this question in an email and she did respond to me, but I would now like to place that question on record. And that is, Council will recall that the Works Manager was asked if he had the capacity to prepare a further report on the proposed Buckland Walk, given that at the time he had only been in the role for a very short period of time. So my question, and he replied in the affirmative. So why is this further report, not on this agenda? And again, I'm happy to have that on notice with a response. Thank you.
That will be taken on notice. That's
Thank
an
you.
operational matter that the General Manager will address in due course. Certainly. And if Councillor Arnold could please send Ms Herrick's Higgins, I've done it. Email those questions through, please, to make it a little bit easier.
Certainly can, Mayor. No problem.
Thank you. Okay, so no further questions. Just confirm that one. No. Moving on to item 11, confidential items closed session. In accordance with the requirements of the Local Government Act Meeting Procedures Regulations 2015, I declare the meeting closed to the public in order to discuss the following matters. Item 1, minutes of closed session, ordinary council meeting held on the 26th of May 2020, as per the provisions of Regulation 34 of the Local Government Meeting Procedures Regulation 2015. Item 2, bridge replacement over Orford Rivulet, Revon Road, tender number T002-2020, as per the provisions of Regulation 15.2D of the Local Government Meeting Procedures Regulation 2015. And item 3, request to overturn Council Decision 199/20 from closed session of the ordinary council meeting held on the 26th of May 2020, as per the provision of Regulation 15.2A and Regulation 18 of the Local Government Meeting Procedures Regulation 2015. Could I have a motion, please, to move into closed? Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. I move that Council moves into closed at 5:32 p.m.
And somebody a second, please? Councillor Brini? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Now, if we could turn off the recording, and I'm just going to adjourn. We need another 10 minutes.